capacities, including, of course, his new posting that is responsible for driving our value addition in our agro produce. We have several stakeholders in this room, our partners in the private sector, and also key partners from the different agencies and departments of government. Quickly looking at yesterday, we were understanding the Africa Continental Free Trade Area with several presentations made yesterday, but majorly looking at the overview of the CFTA, what it's about, what's in it, and where we are at harnessing it. We also had a presentation from our Secretary General of the Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat, His Excellency Wamkele Mene, who was basically telling us on moving towards operationalization of the CFTA. Please note that I'm from Western Uganda. Sometimes our L's are R's and our R's are L's. So I apologize in case I mix them up, okay? We then had our panel discussion, the first of three, which will be happening during this national dialogue, contextualizing the CFTA for Uganda, and a great conversation where we had both Dr. Joy Kategekwa, who was joining us from New York, and the team here, Dr. Daniel and Dr. Isaac, who were basically helping us understand the Continental Free Trade Area and how, if you broke it down into Uganda's perspective, where some of the opportunities are, but also the challenges they are in for us to be able to position ourselves to benefit from this trade, the free trade area. This conversation is on for 3 days, as we mentioned. This is just day 2. And speaking to day 2, we'll be looking at how we can strategically benefit from this 1.3 billion market, the African market, and benefit from it as a country and as a region, as a bloc, as part of the ESC. So we'll have a couple of presentations, but majorly we'll have a key panel discussion on how best Uganda can position herself, and that will be moderated by my colleague Mildred Tuhaise, and a plenary session later with Ben Mwine. But quickly begin today's conversation. Allow me to invite Dr. Paul Bagabo, the trade development consultant, to come and make his presentation on positioning Uganda to benefit from the CFTA. And thereafter, we'll quickly make adjustments to the program probably, but also then dive into the panel discussion. We will extend the time we have for the panel discussion because we didn't have as much time yesterday, and we would want to get your views. And those who are joining us via Zoom, the comment section will be opened and moderated again by the service provider, so we are able to control the tone on that platform, but able to also get questions from that platform. So may I now invite, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Paul Bagabo. Please put your hands together for Dr. Paul. I will quickly sanitize this place, Doctor, for you, so I don't bring any problems.
So how does this work? Okay. The country director for UNDP, the UNDP team, government officials here, the private sector. I'm glad to be here with you to talk about how we can position Uganda to benefit from the Continental Free Trade Area. My name is Paul Bagabo, and I've worked for some time in the area of trade and trade facilitation, including, of course, issues around duties and the CET. So we've been working in these things for about maybe 8 years now, and we've done research, and some of what I'm going to say today will share from the work that we've done. So when you hear that we want to benefit from the CFTA, what does it mean? Simply put, it means that's a bigger market. And so this bigger market is to benefit the private sector. And of course, indirectly, it will benefit government because there will be growth, revenue, and of course, employment. We heard a lot about the CFTA itself. So today, what I'll do is just give you some background information on where we are and how we can get out of that situation. And then I'll conclude a little bit with some remarks for the private sector as they start this journey. I won't talk much about this because we had it in detail. Yesterday we heard about the countries that have signed and the countries that have ratified. We heard about the opening of the market, the 1.2 billion people. And of course, we also heard that if all goes well, between now and 2040, I think we'll increase our revenues, incomes by between 50 and 70 billion. Because I don't have so much time, I will dive right in, and I'll not talk very much about services, but also the opportunities for services do exist under the CFTA. And with these services, of course, we're talking about tourism, financial services, transport and communication, and all those other things that come with it. I will focus a little bit for today on goods, and we can have another conversation on services. So, as a country, we want to benefit from the CFTA, but where are we? And I'll give you some statistics and then I'll talk about it. Generally, I think we are net importers. That means that we are importing more than we're exporting. Over the years from 2015, this trend has been going on. It improved a little bit in 2017, but then this deficit increased, and we can ignore 2020 because that was a bad year because of COVID. But we'll talk about it and I'll keep referring to it. But you can focus a lot on the period 2015 to 2019 to create this picture. What does it mean? It means that if we want to benefit from this trade, we need to work to increase our exports and find a way to decrease our imports. In terms of the key imports, our main imports as a country, but also as a region, East Africa, are petroleum products, motors, pharmaceuticals, iron and steel, and to a certain extent, edible oil. Why is this an interesting statistic? Is because all these products, including edible oil, we have the capacity to import. To manufacture locally. Petroleum products, of course, Uganda, Kenya, and to a certain extent, South Sudan and Rwanda, and have discovered vast quantities of oil. And so, if this goes on very well, we could be able to save the revenue that we use to import petroleum products. Motors, of course, Rwanda, Kenya for some time, and Tanzania to a small extent have started assembling. In Uganda, you've heard about Kira Motors, and so the opportunities for reducing our import bill are huge. If we talk about pharmaceuticals and iron and steel, yesterday we heard here that we have vast quantities of iron ore, and Tanzania has vast quantities of coal, and if we work together, we can either move the iron ore to the coal or bring the coal to the iron ore, and we shall save that import bill. Similarly, for pharmaceuticals, I think there is a lot of work going on under research and development, but also work around establishment of an enabling environment to enable the production of pharmaceuticals locally here. We already have some industries, but I think that this is interesting because 80% of our import bill we can save. The next one I want to show you is where do these imports come from? You know, we love America, and many of you know that we're struggling very much to negotiate agreements with America and the EU and so on. Incidentally, most of our imports come from Asia. So if government officials really want to strike good deals, they should be doing this with Asian countries, particularly China and India. And of course, we have some imports from COMESA. What does this mean? It means that if we work very hard on this continental free trade area, we can then find opportunities of how to replace the imports that we get from COMESA, because it is easier to do so than to do with Asian products, because they are hugely and heavily subsidized. The rice that you eat here benefits from an import subsidy, and so are other products that you import from Asia. It's very, very hard for you to outcompete them. Similarly, for those of you who know about sugar, you might know that for some countries, sugar is now a byproduct. What does it mean? It means that the cost of sugar is zero. And that implies that whatever the import duty or restrictions you put on it, you just cannot outcompete these countries like Brazil. And so we need to start thinking very hard. If we want to benefit from African continental free trade area, we're going to compete with these people with all these subsidies. So what do we do? So that's some of the work that we shall discuss. Exports. I've divided this into two tiers, tier 1 and tier 2. Tier 1, we have gold, coffee and tea, cereals, and vegetables. Now, we're not exporting as much as we should be exporting. Why? Because of two things. One, we mainly export raw materials or semi-processed materials. Mainly coffee goes raw. Similarly, the value addition in tea is quite minimal because most of the extra value addition is done in Europe and the other markets, especially Pakistan. In cereals, we're struggling very much because of the capacity to supply sustainably, the standards issues, and restrictions in the destination markets that we have. And so there is a problem that if we are to grow, we need to concentrate on these products and then look at the problems therein. This is tier 2 exports. So we have fish, non-metal minerals, dairy products, sugar and honey, iron and steel. For sugar, I've talked about it, but even within the region, we are facing a number of restrictions because most of the export destinations also produce sugar. Secondly, vested interests in those countries mean that those countries prefer to import outside the region, outside EAC and COMESA, than within the region. For iron and steel, we're really competing with the big boys of the world, and it is hard. We've tried everything, but the subsidies in those countries and restrictions make it impossible for us to export huge volumes. And for dairy products, as a country, I think we are rearing these cows for leisure. As I was having lunch, I had a colleague of mine telling others that, you know, I have cows, but I also have a daughter. And because she's in school now, when she's going to school, I sell a cow. So most of our colleagues who have a lot of cows are rearing them for leisure. We need to move the mindset from rearing for leisure to an export-oriented approach. And that's the challenge we're having with dairy products. I'll also discuss a little bit why we seem to be performing well in dairy products, but this might change as we start to operationalize the CFTA. On the export destinations, COMESA, I think, ranks high. What does it mean? It means that if we put more effort in exporting to our neighbors, especially EAC and COMESA, as a country, we shall benefit. We shall be able to move into industrialization because it's an easier market to reach than the markets of Europe, North America, and Asia, for the reasons that I've talked about. I got this from the IGC, and they've done some work around how we're performing in terms of the farms that are actually producing for export. In terms of export farms per population, I think we're way behind our neighbors and in Africa. And so if we want to open up our market, we should start to think we're also opening up to competition. And that is very critical because we need to rise up and increase the level of export production through a number of measures that I'll point out. In terms of mean exports per farm, we're still way behind. EAC countries are 1.16 and the rest of Africa is 2.74. So what are the issues? Over the last 10 years, the government has taken steps to support industrial development and production, especially with regard to infrastructure, power, roads, and borders. Also, there's been a drive to industrialization through incentives and export promotion measures, including, of course, tax exemptions for exporters. Of course, we have our boo-boo. We need to know that boo-boo is so inward-looking. As a country, we need to move this vision carefully because it affects our relationship based on the agreements that we've signed. It's good. It has helped domestic industries to grow, and this is one of the initiatives that many countries used. The problem is these countries used them and closed that door. Right now, they're the biggest critics of boo-boo. So as a country, we either need to be obstinate and say we shall go with boo-boo, or we need to know that there are sanctions to what we are doing. But it is a good initiative. But that is the downside. Of course, there are other trade facilitation measures that have come up, supported by our development partners, and these include cargo tracking, one-stop border post, electronic single window, and we've also established export processing zones. Unfortunately, with export processing zones, we seem to have missed the bus. We can talk about that. And then we have our NDP3, which is our overarching framework for development, and it stresses industrialization and export growth, very much in line with the Continental Free Trade Area. Okay, so despite government effort, we still have some challenges. It's good to bring these challenges to the table and we'll talk a little bit about what can be done. But I think as a country, we need to recognize that these are the challenges that will prevent us from benefiting. One is the size of our economy. It is small and predominantly agro-based. I know countries like China took drastic steps where they moved huge populations out of the villages in order to create large farms and move agriculture from peasant farming to industrialized agriculture. You know, we've tried through, as a government, through different tactics. As you see, many border riders, many of them came from the villages, and they opened an opportunity for large chunks of land to be mechanized. But as a country, we haven't taken advantage of that. We also have a high cost of doing business, especially through a high regulatory burden. And then, because there's limited value addition, most of our activities are concentrated in agro-processing. In terms of export competitiveness, and I think that this might be one of the big things that we need to discuss here, I think we don't have adequate capacity to meet standards of the export markets. That's something we need to work on. We do have a bureau, the Bureau of Standards, and I hope the head is here and can talk about it. But I think one of the biggest challenges for the country is in terms of meeting the standards in the export markets. And of course, as the moves had been, all the time when you try to enforce standards, it becomes a huge burden, especially to SMEs. So what do we do to support them? I know over the last 2 weeks, they've closed many of the maize mills, which is good for the country, but as you know, many of them will complain that they don't have the finances to meet the standards, which will require change of technology. We do also produce the same commodities across the region. If you look at Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, if you look at South Africa, Malawi, Zambia, most of our products are the same, leaving very little scope for export development, because you're trying to take maize, they have maize. You're trying to take sugar, they have sugar. Right now, you can't take rice to Tanzania. It becomes very hard. So we need to think to try and diversify some of our exports and move away from homogeneity. We also have an inadequate policy framework to enhance industrial development and export growth. Over the years, we've tried many times with start and stop to develop a comprehensive trade and industrial policy. We're on the way there, but we need support from our development partners so that we can help develop a comprehensive and robust policy on export. And then, inadequate investments in trade facilitation. Issues around customs and administrative documentation, procedures and inspection. We have a huge problem with our ICT. You know, everybody in this country has gone E, and ICT. The problem is that the backbone that we have, first of all, is very expensive. So the cost of ICT for many enterprises is beyond reach. The government regulation and policies around ICT are not very much helping to promote. We're looking more at the revenue than the long term. There's need to make a change, and we need to be honest here. And then, of course, we've suffered a long time since signing onto the customs, the common market, with restrictions on free movement of persons, capital, and factors of production. If that has happened with the EAC, I think you're going to have a problem when you try to go to some of these countries in Africa. The last one is, of course, access to affordable finance. As you know, the interest rates that we have cannot support enterprises to grow. Of course, coupled with the downturn in the economy due to many factors, including COVID, it becomes then very, very hard for companies that took loans to recover. I'll tell you a story. In 1999, I was talking to a colleague of mine when they had just diversified Tororo Cement. And he told me something which was very interesting. He said, when they wanted to buy Tororo Cement, they went to take a loan. And they took a loan of 5.6 million US dollars. When they got to Uganda, they realized if they just lent out that money, because they got the loan at about 3 or 4%, they realized if they just lent out that money, they would make a lot of money. And so you can see the difference between the loans, the borrowing, the financial interest rates in different countries which we are competing with and Uganda. The rates are so high and you cannot just make it. Of course, as I said earlier, we promoted free zones, which is a really good thing. But the free zones module has limitations that make it very hard for us to benefit based on that. One of them, of course, is that you can only export very little, 20% to the region. And two, that it is very hard for you to track, monitor, and enforce that your partners are doing the right thing, are being honest. And because of that, I think there's need for us to start thinking to move away from free zones to special economic zones that do offer larger opportunities as well as other benefits beyond tariffs, so that we can use that as an avenue for growth. Many countries have moved that direction. And maybe the Ministry of Trade and the Ministry of Finance need to explore this. Okay. I'll wind down by just pointing out what can we do to position Uganda. One, it's really important for us to develop a trade and industrial policy that can enhance quality and quantity of production, because the markets where we want to go require sustainable quality and constant quantity. Yesterday, the PS told us that there was someone struggling to sell ducks, so you can imagine. And of course, we need to add on to that issues around competition and value chain development so that we can encourage growth of SMEs around the value chain. I'll tell you something which surprises me sometimes, that the manufacturers are also wholesalers and are also retailers. Talk about steel and iron, talk about sugar, talk about edible oil, talk about all these products. What does it mean? That as a country we are moving towards monopoly and oligopoly. So how will the small and medium enterprises grow? For some products, and yesterday we heard about the value chain, you need to allow smaller enterprises to buy semi-finished products from the bigger enterprise and be able to make a margin. That is not happening very well in the country. So we need to think about that. Standards, I think we talked about it yesterday. We'll continue to talk about it. I think they drive market access. And so as a country, we need to work very much on the issue of standards to enable our producers to access these markets. Without standards, there's nothing much we can do. Improvements in productivity and efficiency. Of course, we have a number of initiatives. we have Operation Wealth Creation, that is in the agricultural sector. And I think with this, we need to look at issues around efficiency and effectiveness. And also what we call comparative advantage as a country. In the Ministry of Trade, we have the Industrial Research Institute. Not very many people are making use of it. I don't know whether it should be the other way around, that the ministry should market this institute and help small and medium enterprises to benefit from research and development. In the Ministry of Agriculture, we have this NAGRIC and the database. And as I said earlier, many of us who have large amounts of cattle have them as a status symbol. We're not using them effectively to export and increase competitiveness. Maybe it's just about mindset change, but as a country, we've really created the environment for us to grow our dairy sector, and the sector has grown. Of course, there are challenges with exports, prevented, of course, by NTBs, but that's something that we can sort out. First, we need to look at production. And then the NPA, I've talked about it. In terms of reform, I think we need to undertake reforms to have financial sectors, use the Uganda Development Bank to enable small and medium enterprises to access the resources to enable them to grow. The interest rates are just too high. Human capital development and infrastructure are things that the government is working on, but there is need for a lot of effort in that area, because without that, the private sector cannot benefit from skilled labor. And of course, ICT backbone. We have the ministry, but please appreciate that many small and medium enterprises just cannot access very good quality ICT. The cost is high. But also, for many of you who are trading, you know that for sometimes in the month, you cannot just access the URA website. So you can do nothing. You cannot enter any entry. You cannot transact any business. And that affects the ease with which we're doing business. I'll wind up by a word of caution. We have done well over the last 8 years, principally because most of our exports are heavily protected. When we open up to the Continental Free Trade Area, we may suffer a little bit, because when you protect a lot, you leave very little room for increase in competitiveness. And so our products might not be able to compete with products that come when we open up the market. So on top of losing the ESC market, we might also lose a little bit of our own market if we're not careful. So we need to take measures to try and reduce the cost of trade and improve the quality through standards so that we are able to compete when the market is opened. The ESC is our best route to Africa, but many of the issues around trade development in the ESC are not yet complete. We need to make sure that we finalize the comprehensive review of the CET, because we're negotiating as ESC. We also need to take advantage of regional infrastructure developments that can help improve competitiveness. For example, this SGR, there's a lot of discussion around there, but the discussions have hit an impasse because our partners are not cooperating very well with us. So we need to continue the political dialogue to ensure that we unlock some of these challenges. I've not talked very much about NTBs because we talked about it very much yesterday, and everybody knows that we need to work to resolve many of the NTBs. The other issue that I want to talk about is the support towards a better understanding of issues that are very important in the CFTA. Issues around rules of origin. Many of the small and medium enterprises just don't have inadequate knowledge about these rules of origin and how they can benefit from the CFTA. Rules of origin, of course, prevent us from exporting certain products because they don't qualify as locally made products. I want to stop here and I want to thank you.
Surely, after that presentation, and I only had 3 people clapping. Thank you very much, Doctor, for helping us set the stage for what's going to be a fantastic conversation. Doctor, you provided some of the answers, but I still stayed with a couple of questions, which I'm hoping Mildred will help me with. Do we revisit our bilateral protocols, trade protocols with our partners? Is that a conversation we will be having? Do we begin driving a conversation on value addition, and then through what you are talking about in terms of financing, to be able to provide trade financing? Is this some of the areas we should be putting our money? The restrictions you are talking about, does that also get included in our bilateral conversations with these countries, and even at a continental level? Is this something we should be having? You talked to the issue of export promotion. Yes, what's our export promotion strategy? I know the Export Promotions Board is here. And how prepared are we for competition? URA is represented in this room, and I'm excited because one of the questions I have is a question they are trying to address. How do we formalize the informality? And that is going to be a good question, because a lot of our trade, especially the trade with our neighbors, is very informal. There's very limited data on that. But even when you look at the data that has been shared by UNDP and partners, the largest number of the traders in this informal trade are women. I think I saw 81% of this informal trade is done by women. And that's, for me, how do we then transform the lives of our women and young people if we don't formalize those processes? And I think Mildred is going to give us the answers to this. So I'm excited with Mildred and her panel. We've discovered her panel will be even larger than what we have in front of us. So some of our 1 or 2 panelists will be seated with us in the audience. But also, there are key partners amongst us who will be allowed to contribute during the panel discussion through the plenary, which Ben will be moderating. So may I now invite, Mildred, I was buying you time because I saw you were still doing a couple of things. Okay, I needed to mention that we have tried to expand on the time provided because the panel is quite diverse, but also the size of the panel only allows that we give them enough time to delve into some of the issues Dr. Paul has provided for us today. So I'll now invite Mildred Tuhaise from NBS, who will come and run us through our panel discussion. And then she'll be able to introduce her panelists, quite eminent persons in their field. And they are they're representing the entire sector across the please come. I'm buying time as you join. You come closer. The TV time doesn't allow me to give you a long break, so I'm allowing you to get closer, then I can hand over. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, round of applause for Mildred.
Thank you. Thank you, Morris. Thank you very much. And like Morris said, yesterday I realized that there is a lot of space the free trade area is. Brought out a number of issues, or some have been talked about once again. of course, including the cost. Amongst the cost was an issue of electricity. We're looking at reducing these and reducing our cost of electricity to about 5 cents per unit, and yet other countries across Africa are actually at about 3 cents. So whereas we are just working towards 5, is it the best price that we could be able to get at that point in time? Agriculture, very, very important, but a number of dynamics that come through in terms of value addition. Also, we did see Dr. Bagabo speak about the aspect of having the same kind of product. So where do we put our competitive advantage? What do we choose as Uganda, as a country? Like I said yesterday, out of the 55 African countries, 34 of these are low-developed countries. So literally, you're going to have the same kind of thing you're doing, but you have the agreement, you're accessing the same markets, you're allowing products coming in, crisscrossing borders. What do you need to pay attention to? And that's where our focus is going to be this particular afternoon. And allow me introduce to you my panel, as huge as it is. But we will do a back and forth. We'll do some time for the panel, get some time to have responses or questions coming in from the audience. My friend Ben Mwine will be helping me out with that. And then as we get back, so we can be able to utilize as much time. Those who are following us online, please remember to use the hashtags. Send in your questions and we will have those answered. So without any further ado, allow me invite my panelists in no particular order. They have huge CVs, so I'll compress that in just a brief introduction. I will start off with Mr. Kayemba Deo, who is the Managing Director of East African Roofing Systems Limited. And Mr. Kayemba will be representing Ms. Barbara Mlwana, the Chairperson of Uganda Manufacturers Association. Mr. Kayemba Deo, please come and take your seat. It's already labeled right there. A round of applause for him as he comes through. I will also invite to represent Mr. John Musinguzi Rujoki, who is the Commissioner General, Uganda Revenue Authority. We will instead have Mr. Alex
Kigali to its knees on energy shift to Nairobi. Nothing brings out the true picture of a football derby like the Mijingo Derby. It's a derby that leaves many desiring for more. And oh yes, this is the time that the question that is frequently asked will be answered. If you own the water, we own the land. And all this will be sorted out on the 11th of November 2021 at the St. Mary's Stadium in Chitende. Join us live on UBC TV free to air and radios as we bring you action after action as the two bulls fight and we sit back and relax at the comfort of our homes. UBC TV and radios, your home of sports.
Tourism. To you, Mr. Amos Wekesa, how can we leverage Uganda's advantage over all the other African countries in this trade area?
Thank you so much, Mildred. You marketed me so well, and I was even surprised myself. My name is Amos Wekesa. I'm the CEO of Great Lakes Safaris, also CEO Uganda Lodges. I own a few lodges in national parks, MV Kazinga as well. But I've also gone into agro-processing. So I have just built an agro-processing plant in Soroti, which is probably one of the biggest in the eastern part of Uganda. So I've been able to engage with this at East African levels. I run a business in Rwanda and a bit of Kenya, Tanzania a bit. Just before COVID, I bought a lodge in Tanzania, and I wanted to start competing in Tanzania. So this is a very good topic. And I also want to say that this topic should not end here. I think that we need every Ugandan aware of what it means opening up Uganda to the rest of Africa. It means that if someone is an office messenger at Great Lakes Safaris or advertise a job at Great Lakes Safaris, whether you're a manager, whatever it is, this is going to open up your job to the rest of Africa. So we need to understand that, Ugandans must understand that they're going to be competing at that level. And when it comes to tourism, tourism is, in the world, is the fastest growing sector, generally speaking. In Africa, in 2018, the last 2 years cannot be talked about because in the last 2 years, globally, airlines lost about 66% of the potential business that they should have had. Africa, I can only talk about before COVID. I can give you statistics before COVID. In 2018, Africa received about 67 million arrivals, whole of Africa. That represents 7% fastest growing in the world. So Africa had the fastest growing in terms of percentage. But in terms of earning 67 million passengers that came in the whole of Africa as tourists, that represents only 5% of the global number. And that 67 million people only represent 1% of the earnings of the global tourism, which was 1.7 trillion. A lot of you can read. If you read a report by Jumia, it will give you the statistics. Now, if you look at the statistics properly, you realize that business, people that travel to Africa, out of the 67 million people, 29% were coming to spend on business. The higher spend was on adventure tourists. Adventure tourists are people that have come specifically to enjoy nature, interact with the people, enjoy the weather and so on and so forth across Africa. Now, that represents 71% of the total number. So as Uganda, out of that, I can say adventure tourists were less than 300,000 out of the 67 million people from the global arrivals. A lot of the arrivals we have in Uganda were regional arrivals. A lot of people coming in from Kenya, Tanzania, for different purposes. And our airport, about 2018, was about 1.8 million passengers, which is a very small number compared to even just our neighbors. If you look at Kenya, Jomo Kenyatta Airport, 2018 was going towards 10 million passengers. So Uganda as a country, we're only competing with Mombasa, which was about 1.6 million passengers. And let me tell you, for you to know that your country is developing, it must be engaged in international business. And if it's engaged in international business, there are a number of factors that can indicate to you that that country is actually progressing in international business. One is the number of chains of international hotels. By 2018, Uganda only had one, Sheraton as the international chains of hotels. Serena is actually regarded as a regional brand, and Protea regarded as regional brands. And at that time, 2018, Kenya had 68 international chains of hotels. And by 2022, Kenya will be having 88 international chains of hotels. So like Hilton, Sheraton, and those kind of stuff. That is one factor that you look at. But you also look at the number of passengers your airport handles. So if we wanted to grow in any sector, whether it's manufacturing and everything, to bring in resources, we must focus on, one, improving our airports. Number two, we must focus on growing our numbers through marketing. If we don't do that, the rest, we can talk as much as we want, we will have challenges. Now, as Uganda, one of our biggest opportunities that there's probably no country on this continent that is as gifted, as Uganda is gifted. This morning I was telling a group of Ugandans, I was saying, you know that in the 50s, Entebbe Airport was the largest or the biggest airport in Africa. Someone was like, really? I said, yeah. If you look at the British Overseas Airline Corporation, which is now called the BA, British Airways. British Airways had, actually the British had 6 cities across Africa that they focused on. It was Alexandria, of course, for the Mediterranean. They had Cairo for British Airline Corporation. In Uganda, they had Entebbe, and they had Soroti. And then in South Africa, they had Durban for the access to the ocean, and they had Johannesburg. I know you're going to ask, why Entebbe? British Overseas Airline Corporation pilots were actually trained in Soroti. That is how powerful this country was at the time. Up to now, 80% of Kenya pilots, for example, were once trained in Soroti in Uganda. These are things that we need to be thinking about. Now, for us as a country, there are a few things that we need to be looking at. One is to prepare the population in as far as tourism is concerned. This country, even just from weather alone, if we marketed Uganda as a country with the best weather in the world, why do we have the best average weather in the world? We're crossed by the equator, so we're meant to be human. But because the lowest point in Uganda is 622 meters, somewhere just outside Fort Portal, 622 meters, that's the lowest point in Uganda. Of course, the highest is 5,109, which stands on Africa's largest block of mountains, not in terms of single block, but in terms of blocks. There's no block of mountains that can be compared to the Rwenzoris. In terms of single peaks, it's Kibo on Kili, that is number one, then Mount Kenya, then Margarita in Uganda. Now, if you go and look at research across the world, about 30 to 36% of the people that travel across the world are traveling because they're looking for the best weather. The other factors are attractions and culture, which Uganda has a very fantastic culture, Madrid. So for us as a country, we're gifted. We could actually become a donor country by just telling the world that this country has the best average weather in the world. So of course, when you talk about the other things like birds, there's no country on the African continent that has as many freshwater bodies, lakes and rivers like Uganda does. And that you can Google, you see, so it's a fact. But to us, Lake Victoria means nothing. We can sit here complaining from morning until evening, and you know that research has shown that, research I think was by World Bank, that showed that Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania miss out earning $63 billion because of an idle thinking about this country as a business. We must wake up today and say, we are going to be competing with Tanzania. What does Tanzania need? We're going to be competing with Egypt. What does Egypt need? What can we send there? Recently, Madrid, I know we're going to stop me, but let me give you one thing. I hosted a Nigerian billionaire recently here, and I took him to Queen Elizabeth National Park. As we were chatting, I realized he's in ICT. He's in, he has ships, and the man has reinsurance. When I told him, why don't you invest in reinsurance? He said, no, your economy is too small. I said, how? He said, all your reinsurance in a year only turns over $98 million a year. He said, that's 50% of what I turn over as an individual. He said, no, I can't come to your country for that. But he said, if I had a chance to come to Uganda, which he's trying to consider, is to do ships on Lake Victoria. But he said, if I was Uganda, what would I focus for? He said, I have never in my life eaten a sweet pineapple like a Ugandan pineapple. And he said, in Nigeria, one pineapple costs $7. He said, we're having planes and planes of pineapples waking up planes waking up in the morning and just shipping pineapples to Nigeria. He said Nigeria imports milk worth $650 million a year from France. I'm told you pour milk in this country. He told me Ghana imports milk. Madam, are you from Ghana? Ghana imports milk worth $250 million. Is that right? Yes. Every single year from France. If we woke up in the morning and decided and said we're going to take our milk to Ghana, yeah, and we can. So this gives us an opportunity. I could talk until cows come home. Thank you so much.
Amen. If it wasn't for the mask, you would keep seeing my mouth say, wow, wow. And some of those figures that he was mentioning, and I think it's just eye-opening for us. It speaks to the realities that we're not paying attention to, but we're just here enjoying, and we love spewing those statements, best weather, sweetest pineapples, but how are we taking advantage of that? I'll be coming back to you, Amos. And I want to twin in an aspect of the God-givenness still, from just the tourism now to the weather, and I'll come to you, Brigadier General Felix Kulaije, to the weather that then enables us to do agriculture. But we're doing subsistence agriculture. In Uganda, the president has continuously talked about the over 68% of people in agriculture. A great percentage of those are women, and yet we are doing subsistence. Like earlier on, we had the doctor say, even those who are rearing animals, they're doing it for leisure. I have cows, just go take pictures with them, and that is it. How best can we utilize that potential fully to benefit from the Continental Free Trade Area?
Thank you so much, Mildred. Good evening, everyone in the room and those outside. I salute Mr. Wekesa. He has done part of what I wanted to do. But it all comes back to our mindset. Glass is half empty or half full. And I think the figures Mr. Wekesa has given us just show that Dr. Bagabo was addressing from the half-empty angle. We are producing the same things, sure. He has just given you. Others are importing pineapples, which we are throwing away here. Milk is being poured. In 2018, thanks to the intervention of OWC, we had a bumper harvest of maize in this country. In the same year, Botswana had produced only 24% of their maize requirement. Why didn't we exploit that vacuum? The problem is here. It's us. Why don't we enjoy or utilize or exploit our comparative advantage in terms of good soils, in terms of good climate? Even the other countries in the region which are producing maize like us, they do not satisfy their markets. The last time I checked with Kenya, only 27% of their soils were arable for maize growing. 27% of that huge country. What does that mean, therefore? That they have a deficit which Uganda could have satisfied. We are capable of producing food for the entire region. So what is the problem? And two, I would like a bit to also inform the audience that many of the border-borders who have come to town have not opened up huge tracts of land. In fact, they have created land fragmentation. Our experience who have been in the field is that many of these inherit land from their parents, sell these plots, 1 or 2 or 3 acres, and they buy a border. So land fragmentation is not only now, as we used to know in the past, in Ichigezi sub-region alone, it's now Bugisu, it's now Busoga. Buganda has gone. So even if you wanted to introduce mechanization in agriculture in this country, you are only left with parts of eastern Uganda, that is Sorot area, and northern Uganda. South of Lake Choga, to talk about industrial mechanization, agricultural mechanization, you are there dreaming. Reason, land fragmentation. 3, even where government has put interventions like industrial plants, industrial parks, people are not utilizing them. They are seeing them as a government thing. It is theirs. So the ownership of the citizen, of the government initiatives, is not there. Where is the problem? Leadership at local level. Some people think being a leader is simply maybe sitting in an office. Leadership means informing people what they don't know. Even what you assume they know, it doesn't do bad repeating it. Christianity has been around for over 2,000 years. But every day we are quoting the scriptures because people continue sinning every time. So there is no sin in repeating what is available. 4 is information sharing to exploit our potential. I've just been meeting the MD of Uganda Women Bank. A lot of work has been done by that bank in terms of supporting SMEs. Who knows? Who knows what they are doing? No one. And I was telling her, if even me, I don't know, how would you expect my mother down in Chanika to know? So the point is, we are even shy about what we can do. 5, the cost of money in this country. Elsewhere, if you are borrowing money for agriculture or for industrialization, you borrow at 2%, 1%. Here, whether you are borrowing for industry or what, still the interest rate is at 18, 20 or 24%. So it's prohibitive. The point is, both from government side, we need to change our mindset. We must know we have to do a service to the population for them to change. And then me, I will speak what others fear to say. The question of greed, corruption. Even those who want to borrow money to do business, they part with something. Foreigners want to invest in our economy. In big projects like power, you are talking about electricity. There must be down payment before even your papers are looked after. I mean, are looked at. I'm not going to name here, but I know. So unless we are genuine to ourselves and point out where the leprosy is, it will not go away. So in my view, it's about utilizing our comparative advantage. That even the things we produce being produced elsewhere, we enjoy better climate and better soils. So we can do better than them. Without having to go beyond Africa. 2, the fact that we have a very, very hospitable population is something we would be exploiting. But look at tourism, where my brother Mr. Wekesa is. Our neighbors Tanzania have a whole TV channel, TV safaris, dedicated to tourism. And every evening I'm watching it because I enjoy the animal kingdom. You know, if you want to see God's miracles, you watch the animal kingdom. If you want to see how God is really scientific, you have to watch the animal lives. Now, why should I go to watch a foreign TV when my country have the greatest potential?
Yeah.
In 2000, I met, we had a British defense advisor here who told me he did not have interest in the birds until he came here. Because he discovered we had 3,000 bird species in this country. No other country has such a number of bird species. How many Ugandans know? But we see them. At one point, I had the honor of giving security to His Excellency Carter. What was he doing? Bird watching. You know, we spent days in the forest following birds. You know, and for me, at that time, because I was young and not very exposed, I was thinking, this old man wasting my time. But there is a lot of money in this country that's going untapped.
Yeah.
So then he was talking about the quality of pineapple. Did you know how delicious our sweet bananas are? In Europe and America, they are importing from Latin America. The bananas they eat are not even a quarter way in sweetness to ours. So a group of generals from the British Defense College were here. And I encouraged them to eat these small bananas, and they were hesitant because they thought they tasted like the ones they import. Oh my God, of course I convinced them. In 5 minutes, all the clusters were finished. Whoever ate it said, oh my God, it's so sweet, so sweet. Because elsewhere, they don't have them.
Okay.
Cross-check our friends in the Ministry of Trade. How many countries on this continent produce beans? How many? Or the nuts we play around with at breakfast. How many? Before Nigeria go to the oil boom, they used to have what they call the nut mountains. What are they called? They were producing groundnuts in Nigeria in so huge quantities that they were calling them mountains. They would have mountains heaped. Thanks to oil, they abandoned agriculture.
Okay.
So in short, we have what it takes. Goat's meat. Ladies and gentlemen, you don't eat goat everywhere like you find this so nice and easy to cook here. Elsewhere, the goat's meat has a funny smell. I'm not shy to say it. But our goat's meat, you just walk to the butcher, buy your goat's meat, and within a few minutes you are eating. What am I saying? We enjoy a comparative advantage in agricultural products across the continent. And then you have a huge area, the Sahel, which has no agricultural production. What are we doing about it? Lastly, my humble view is, like it has been said before, our potential, the God-given gift of this country has made us lazy in thinking, in exploring where we stand advantage to exploit. Until you are hungry, you don't look for food. Can I lastly share with you the question of fish? He was saying our Lake Victoria is lying idle.
Just briefly, yes.
A few individuals are enjoying the lake through fishing. But the fishing is also pastime.
Leisure.
It's leisure. Some of the fishermen, once he has picked about 5 fishes for the day, no, actually for 2 days, he has lunch, supper, so he will rest because even the following day he has what to eat. Until we are challenged. And it's all about changing our thinking.
Mindset.
That what God gave us is for us to manage. You know, ladies and gentlemen, God did not create man first. He created everything else and created man as a manager. That's why we were the last to be created, to manage what God has done. In this country, I'm going to tell you, we are mismanaging God's creation.
Thank you. I'll be coming back to you, Brigadier General Felix. Now you know the reason why he is the Director Mobilization, Mindset Change at Operation Wealth Creation. Allow me to get to the only lady on the panel, and that is Christine Rita Namsovia Bankwa, and she's actually the project manager, African Continental Free Trade Area Awareness Project, but she's representing the SMEs today on the panel. Now, looking at research clearly in Africa, 80% of the businesses are SMEs, and that is according to an African Development Bank report, that we have 80% of those as SMEs, but also if we're looking at 85% informal sector, and yet also having over 90% of the workforce or labor force in those SMEs, in that informal sector, being the women and young people. How do we get to deal with SMEs? Because there is always issues of capacity, both in terms of technical capacity and even the resources that we were talking about. How do we maximize that potential? How do they come on board to also fully, grasp the opportunities in the CFTA?
Thank you so much, Mildred. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I'd just like to address some of the points the Federation would like to bring to the forefront. As you said, women and youth are extremely important, and we find that they in particular struggle to export to other African countries. High tariffs are an issue, supply side capacity constraints are an issue, but the biggest issue that we have right now is an issue of awareness. So for them to actually become players in this market, awareness is the biggest issue. One of the greatest fears they have is that they will be squeezed out of the market when imports come in. There's a fear of not actually having capacity, and this is why we are part of this project, because we want to help them, help youth, women, SMEs in particular, to build capacity. We are very concerned about the micro SMEs, the startups in particular, because we know they have a high failure rate. We are concerned that women and youth do tend to get into business and then stay at one level. They're not scaling, they're not growing. So it's very important right now to help them to deal with the challenges that they face. I mean, I think we've seen when you're in a traffic jam, how many young people, how many women are selling. And then you look at the older ones, and this shows you that there isn't much movement. People are getting into business just for survival. And when you are in business just for survival, it's hard to have this Pan-African mindset. It's hard to even adopt business principles. So we are really strong on focusing on helping them to build capacity in that space. We are also really interested in helping to build an export enhancement strategy or policy. So basically, export readiness goes beyond, the things we've mentioned, resources, finance, but also the market research and understanding what is a target country, what does an opportunity mean? It's not just because you've heard that an opportunity exists that it is, but there are certain things that need to be put in place. First of all, the target market, the country, needs to be willing to invest in what you offer. They need to actually desire it. And more than that, they need to be willing to cooperate in terms of, the tariffs, the barriers to trade and things that we talk about. Innovation is an issue as well. And also nurturing international relationships and strengthening our position when it comes to digitization and also pricing. So those are some of the things that we're focusing on, Mildred, especially when it comes to women and youth.
How better do we involve the women? Because you already talk about fears. Now fear is a disadvantage in itself, because you are fearing that you're going to be kicked out of the market that already, brings you to a point of disadvantage. How can they better be helped, both from government and also from organizations such as the UNDP and even the Federation itself? First, to have that information, but also be able to scale up, their opportunities.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of scaling, we do work a lot on the incubation side. Okay. As I said, a lot of people are in business because it's about survival. So when we look at women and youth, we're also looking at talent mining. So understanding what they're really good at, what can be monetized, and then showing them how they can benefit from the government resources that are available. And also the training aspect is extremely important when it comes to the business principles, when it comes to understanding how a business operates, when it comes to targeting new markets, and also when it comes to mobilizing their resources, the little resources they have, and then teaching them how to multiply what they have so that they can scale. Because like I said, the growth is an issue. You get into business, you're stuck in one place. You cannot afford to grow. I think that's another serious issue. People cannot afford to actually grow. So equipping them with the skills that they need to actually grow and helping them to access finance and also what to do with that finance so that the business can actually grow.
Okay. Thank you very much, Rita. I'll be getting back to you. Let me get to Mr. Okello in the audience. As a ministry, first of all, yesterday the biggest issue was for you to even think about taking advantage of whatever opportunities, you need to understand what the CFTA is about. Information, and clearly out of what we are discussing, information remains a very key aspect. I know well that Uganda also launched the industrialization policy, but there are a number of issues, including financing, which have come through, especially for the SMEs, like Rita was speaking about. How do you as the ministry help, number one, the people access the information, but also be able to coordinate with organizations like UNDP to ensure that the women, the youth, and everyone who needs to take advantage of the opportunities is able to know what is happening? As opposed to looking at this as an elite discussion, for the people who know their English, and it ends there.
Thank you very much, Mildred.
I would kindly request Mr. Court if you're able to stand up and face the audience so the cameras can capture.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mildred, and then my colleagues on the panel. Let me also thank the participants for coming for this meeting. I think what you've mentioned today, actually, since yesterday, we are launching the aspect of aggressive mobilization. aggressive campaign for awareness about the ACFTA. And I think, as Joey put it yesterday, you need to know the ACFTA. But for me, I think it is not about knowing the ACFTA. For me, it is about knowing the market. We need to know where the market is. The ACFTA is simply a framework that takes us to the market. So we need to know what the market actually offers for Uganda. But before we actually know the market,
we can be able to get. We will definitely need to have that microphone for on air, the audio we need to get to, but we have one that's coming through, Mr. Court. Sorry, right there. It's on. You've put it off, actually. You can have that back on. Yes, we're good.
Sorry about that. What I'm saying is before we know the market, we need to know ourselves. I think the biggest problem that we have is not actually that the information is not going there. The information could be going there, but what we need to know is what do we have as a country, Uganda. In terms of the products that we have, let me put a good example, maize or the cereals. Who are the people who are actually engaged in the production of cereals? Who are the people who are engaged in the production of legumes? Now, if I give you a task to mobilize 100 metric tons of maize, it might take you even 6 months to get it. So we need to come up with adequate, efficient profiling of products, of enterprises, their location, their capacity, prices, quality, and all those parameters. For those target products that we want to take into the continental free market, we must have that information. And I think I'm happy that in partnership with UNDP, I think the World Food, FAO, those who are on the ground, we should come up with a structure and a framework of collaboration and to see how we can get down there and get this information available. Have a catalog and also have an online system that we can use to readily know what is there. I mean, I would be very uncomfortable shopkeeper if I don't know what is in my stock. So I take myself as an assistant commissioner in charge of this, that getting information about the availability, access, and location and contact of products is one of the priorities that we need to have. And that goes together with mobilization. And we need to reach out there and take the information to the people. And I think somebody talked about the issue of competitiveness. And I think since yesterday, that has been coming out. Competitiveness. But when you talk about competitiveness, what are you looking at in terms of the variables? I think General Brigadier Kulaije put it rightly. It starts with the individual. If you go fish today and then you go and sleep for 2 days, at the individual level, you are not competitive. You must have the urge to go commercial, not simply just to eat and then go back and eat again. So at the individual level, we need to see how we can actually build the capacity and inspire people to take advantage of this market. Then we need to look at competitiveness at the farm level. Farm level, I'm talking about technology. I'm talking about competitiveness and the cost, how these enterprises operate, how competitive are they. If you look at the cost structure of enterprises in Uganda and you compare them across the region, where do we stand? Because that is competitiveness. You look at it in terms of the cost structure and the quality of the technology and the human resources that go into it. So at the farm level, we need to analyze that. Then we need to look at it from the industry level. At the industry level, how competitive are we as a country? So we need to see how we can build capacity. I'm talking about clustering of production based on
identified growth centers within the country. There are key areas where you find coffee growing. There are key areas where you find tea growing. And they're what we call the cattle corridors. So if you're looking at products, we need to cluster them and see how we can exploit synergies and commonly used facilities that can aid to build industrial competitiveness. And then, of course, at the micro level.
Okay.
How do you look at competitive as at a national level? So I think we need to look at ourselves. And then we need to see how we can take the information to the people. But we need to look at it from a holistic point of view.
Yes, Mr. Okello, just before you even get to sit, you talked about a very important aspect, which I think Madam Elsie as well believes in, having a database of these products. But the question is, the CFTA is not the first agreement that we are signing. It's not the first area we are focusing on. We have the East African community, we have COMESA, we have so many other areas that we have markets that had opened up much earlier on. And the question is there any set program in pipeline, or are we just thinking about it right now to start thinking of a database where we can be able to track these products?
Thank you very much. I think that's a very useful question. First and foremost, actually, the chief negotiator of Uganda in this continental free trade area. The continental free trade area is not coming from the blue. It's building on the already existing regional economic communities. The EAC, the COMESA, the SADC, then we have the Central African economic communities, the ECOWAS, and the like. So what we are trying to do at the continental level is to see how to bring all these trading blocks together to have a bigger continental market. So the information about trading across the borders, we already have done it. We already have enough experience. So in terms of readiness, I think we actually even at the point of concluding what we call the tripartite, that is the trade agreement that brings COMESA, EAC, and SADC together. So we already have a huge arsenal of information that actually should take us there. We already have what they call the National Trade Portal, where you can access information relating to procedures, documentation, and cost, charges and fees relating to export of products on a product-by-product basis and country-by-country basis. And we are trying to build on that. We also have what they call electronic single window, where you actually use the information you get from the trade portal to enable you clear your goods for export or for import or for transit purposes. And that is there. But what we are trying now to expand on is to come back now domestically and build the database of enterprises that we can now use because of the COVID. COVID has taught us that we actually need to move away from the traditional way of doing business and go online. But we also need to see how best we can exploit regional partnership. If you want to trade with a Nigerian, you need to have a base there, either through the industry associations or individual. And then you need to understand through the partnership that you have to get into the market there. So I think regional partnership is going to be very, very important in as far as getting into the continental free trade area is going to be concerned. But above all, we need to see how to use bilateral framework. We have the big continental market, but then it is the bilateral aspect that is going to win us in the individual markets. Within COMESA, we have been able to get a very good market for our milk now in Zambia. We have also been able to get a very good market for our milk now in Algeria. And we are using that for other products. So much as you have the big continental framework, the individual bilateral arrangement is what actually wins you the market. And that you do it at all levels. private sector level and government level. Actually, government should take the lead in opening the way for the private sector to go into those individual markets.
That's very key.
Thank you.
That's very key. Thank you very much, Mr. Okello. I think it speaks to the fact of the private sector being very key and how government needs to come through to help harness the potential of the private sector. Let me come to you, Mr. Deo Kayemba, and also on behalf of the Uganda Manufacturers Association. How do we choose what works for us as a Uganda? In the products, in the manufacturing sector, like we were told, there is a lot that we will have in common. But how do we choose what works for Uganda that we can be able to sell outside?
Thank you very much. My name is Deo Kayemba, as introduced earlier. I'm the Vice Chairman of Uganda Manufacturers Association and Managing Director of East African Roofing Systems Limited, an SME operating in Uganda for some time. I would like to start with this. When you are going to play in a national team, you start at the district, or we used to call them dinare, and then you graduate to. Right now, Uganda is in East African Community. We are in COMESA. We tried SADC, but it did not complete the process, and then Africa Continental Free Trade Area took over. But what have we done in EAC? What have we done in SADC? I think that's a training ground for us to be ready, make ourselves ready to trade with the others and then progress to the Africa too. We notice that we have made some progress in some areas, but we have also had a lot of challenges, as Dr. Bagabo mentioned. Actually, when he was giving his presentation, he was talking about my company. Unfortunately, that we have a lot of challenges. When we agree, like the CET, we agree that we are going to charge this in the heated. But when we go to Arusha, 90% of the gazette that comes from Arusha has stays of implementation. Stay implementation of the CET. Instead, they apply a tariff rate of 35%. This unfortunately happens even on intermediate products. I can tell you my company pays 35%. The highest, the highest is 25. My brother Alex will guide me. But beyond the highest CTE rate for an intermediate raw material. These are the challenges which we need to harmonize ourselves regionally in EAC and COMESA, and then be ready for the bigger market. You said, how do you choose? How do you choose? We have to choose where we have competitive advantage. And areas where we have competitive advantage is, of course, as earlier, that homegrown things. If we can do value addition to our agriculture, then we are going to win. If we can do beneficiation, like, I'll give you an example. We have steel in southern Uganda. We have steel in Busuku, in eastern Uganda. We have natural gas regionally. We have oil. That is a competitive advantage. Then you can take it from there and then sell. For example, I give you a good example of goodwill. That is just clay. And we have been able to achieve a lot of milestones in tiles because of clay. These are the areas we need to look at. And then, but also another area. that we see a lot of young talent in ICT, in electricals, in this. Let's encourage them. Let's encourage them so that we can take up the market. I want to move on to the next one. What are the critical actions that we as a country need to take to benefit from this? One of them is readiness strategies to compete. Right now, as I talk, Uganda has no competition law. The Minister of Trade there is a draft that was made. It has never been passed. This is one of the first things we need so that we can regulate how we do B2B, business to business. We need to improve the business environment as guided in the NDP3 and by asking the MDAs to focus on improving productivity of the private sector. We need to improve or work on business formalization. You said 90% of the business in Uganda is informal. How are you going to export when you are producing informally, buying informally, selling informally? Nobody wants to issue the document. You go to a shop and ask for an invoice invoice now. You have committed the biggest crime in the country. How do we then expect to export and benefit from exports?
Okay.
Because exports if you export, you get some tax rebates. Then how are you going to benefit if you are informal? So that's one of the areas. But the other thing, we should not forget the lessons we have learned in the past. I would like to remind you of the lessons, the hard lessons we learned in Southern Sudan, where our traders lost a lot of money.
Yes.
So, if you got sent to, how do you ensure that when I go to Central African Republic, I will not suffer the same fate as I suffered in Sudan?
True.
Yeah? So, we need to have, here I called it, a policy, an insurance policy, or as export guarantee scheme. I think that's a better word. That ensures that when I export, I actually don't lose my money.
Because when I lose, I can be paid.
Yeah, when I lose, I can be paid.
Okay.
Because we are venturing into something new. Yeah?
Okay.
So these are the areas that we need to look. Then, if I have to export to Central African Republic, I like to use that one because up to now I've failed to find a way to sell there. Do I go to Mombasa and then go around? If I want to fly to Central Africa, do I go to Dubai and then fly to Ghana and then come to Central African Republic? These are the areas.
So you're looking at infrastructure and connectivity.
Yeah,
yes.
Infrastructure connectivity.
Okay.
We may not have the rail lines because they are very expensive to build. But we should now start a plan to get the Africa interconnectivity plan.
Thank you.
And for the easy ones, let me finish. For the one like the road, we should have a road, all-weather road connecting every state. That we can achieve. That from Uganda to any other state in Africa, I have an all-weather road. So if I rode my Mercedes-Benz trailer, it will get there. I don't have to go to Mombasa.
Thank you, Mr. Kaimba.
I can talk until the cows come home.
I will definitely come back to you at a later stage. Let's get to the issue of standards, because this is very key. And for Uganda this particular year, we've had this discussion, especially with the rejection of our maize in Kenya because of aflatoxins. And this, we were trying as a country to draw away and saying, you know, we have to be good friends, I mean neighbors. And we were getting away from the real discussion of standards and quality. And that's also one of the things that Dr. Bagabo talked about. We've also experienced issues of Ugandan horticultural products on the international market. So have we learned from the past mistakes that we've done? And what are we planning to do with standards bodies like UNBS helping us deal with quality?
Thank you, Mildred, and the audience. I think you are absolutely right that in international business and international trade, there are certain things you negotiate. You can negotiate to reduce tax. You can negotiate to expand your volumes or quantities to supply. You can negotiate any other thing. But the constant is you can never negotiate quality. You can never negotiate standards. And that's what we have learned. Despite having these markets, the issue is, do you meet the requirement of those markets? And those are the lessons we have learned. As a country, we are quite very fast to go and negotiate the bilaterals. We want to export this to your country, give us the market, give us the quantities, and then you sign it off. So when the implementation comes, they are saying that the quantities and the market should be subject to specific market requirements. And that's where we have fallen off. The issue is not that Ugandan products don't have a market. The problem is that Ugandan products do not meet the specifications of the market, and that's what we need to work on. I'm very happy that Dr. Paul was very bold about this in his research. He says, are we ready for competition in the African continental trade area in terms of quantity and in terms of standards? And for me, I'm saying that indeed, it is no longer about how cheap. I know Dr. Paul was emphasizing more on the cost of production, that certain people have subsidies to reduce the cost of production, and therefore they can sell cheaper. But for me, if the going gets tough in terms of competing by price, actually the quality should get you going, because that one is a constant. It levels down the what? The playing ground. You are aware that people are prepared to pay slightly higher for a safe and quality products. So the issue of price should not arise as we prepare to go into the bigger market. Let's focus and compete on the basis of quality and safe products, because that has no relationship with the price you are going to charge. But it's about the perception, about the trust, about the confidence of your product. I must confirm that Ugandan products are ready to compete. The issue is the mindset and the culture of our people. In Uganda here, people believe that quality standards belong to the Bureau of Standards. Can you imagine? And that's the mindset my brother general is telling me, that when UNBS is telling you, please implement these standards so that you get market confidence, you get trust, and you get access to markets, they think that no, because you are able to sell within your village and within your locality, you think you have arrived. So the mindset of competing beyond your village, beyond your city and beyond your country is not yet with us. Therefore, when this market opens up, are we ready to change that mindset that now I need to voluntarily begin to comply with standards, because standards are good for me as a business to access markets, not for the Bureau of Standards. But that said, we have actually been forced to whip people to comply. In other words, we want to force you to benefit from the what? From the market, because we have now gone ahead to harmonize what we call regional, continental, and international standards at the Bureau. We are a member of the EFC standards body. We have harmonized a number of standards for easy movement of our products across East African regional market. We have embarked on harmonizing of standards, continental standards, to be able to access our products into the African free trade area. We have done that for international standards. We have adopted all international standards. Therefore, a product certified in Uganda should freely get access to Europe, so long as it has been certified against a European standard. It should get access to any country in this continent, So long as we have certified it against the common continental standards, it should get freely to the region so long as we have certified it according to the East Africa regional standard.
Is that harmonization currently available, that UNBS is connecting with the other international agencies or even across the other African countries to know that if I'm certified in Uganda, then I am certified?
Absolutely. We have what we call mutual recognition agreement, which we have already commenced with the EAC. Once a product of Uganda has been certified and you have a quality mark on your product, nobody should question its quality either in Kenya, in Tanzania, in Rwanda, and wherever you are, because we are certifying this against the mutually recognized standard and agreed standard. That's the same concept we are taking to the African continent, and therefore we are saying that as we are doing that, our people should begin to learn that they need to prepare themselves. They are not going to leave any border in this country so long as their product is not meeting a quality standard.
Thank you.
Yes, markets will be negotiated, quotas will be given, but you will fall on the way because your quality, your product does not meet the required quality of the market. And that's our message. Quality is good for you as a business, is not good for us as a bureau. We are just there to support and facilitate you.
Thank you, Mr. Vero. And like you said, we can negotiate everything else, but not quality.
Absolutely.
Let's get to the basics. What is the problem? Is it that we are... versus, persuasion.
Yes.
Where is the point? How are you as NBS coming in to help make it easy, reduce the bureaucracies of someone having to get that Q mark on their products?
Thank you, Mildred. Over a long time, and the biggest excuse has been the cost of standardization. So we have said that as a bureau, we are going to reduce that. So for an SME now who wants to certify a product, we only charge you 500,000 for the entire year to get a permit to apply on your product. And that permit can allow you to sell across the region and across the coming continent. If you divide 500,000 in a year by 12, that monthly cost is even cheaper than the cost you pay for your utility, either water or power. But people will still think that quality standard is expensive. And yet it should be one of the key components of your cost structure because it is a key component of your market access, and therefore you need to invest in it. Secondly is that we have now mobilized the sectors, cross-sector, whether it's an alcohol sector, whether it's a steel sector, whether it's a water sector, to tell them that please keep your house in order, make sure that you voluntarily encourage your people to comply, because the Bureau is not going to continue whipping you. Please appreciate the need for standards, because we have opened the markets, we have harmonized standards across the ESC, we have opened harmonized standards in the continent, we have international standards. Therefore, please bring this to your members and create awareness to them, and let them stop saying that standards must be complied to make the Bureau happy. They should know that standards are good for them to make business. And Amos will tell you that if you can get at least $1, you are better off than getting a shilling. And therefore, let's focus to make more money through exports, and the environment is there. UNBS has put into infrastructure, quality infrastructure there. We have a state-of-the-art laboratories, international accredited labs, meaning that no Muzungu or an African can dispute the quality of the product UNBS has endorsed. And that is the advantage we must take to be able to access these markets.
All right, thank you very much. A round of applause as well for Mr. Biro. Those are issues we needed to talk about very vividly. Let me come to you speaking about aspects of revenues, Mr. Alexander Rubanga. And yesterday, I think it came out clear that one of the worries is just how much money you're going to lose as a country in going into an agreement that will make sure that some products are not going to be taxed. There are tax exemptions that are going to come through. And it was clear it was about 13 million US dollars, or right about more than that Uganda as a country would lose, but would be able to gain much more in other, processes that we would deal with. How are you as Uganda Revenue Authority going to help, number one, deal with the aspect of the informal sector, which is a huge one across not only Uganda but Africa? And one of the excuses always is the tax burden on these businesses. And they prefer to keep informal than become formal, and then they say they're overly taxed. And I put that in quotes. To you, Mr. Rubanga. Yes or no?
Yes, thank you, Mildred, and can I say good afternoon, good evening, even to our viewers online. Yes, maybe let me again say my name. I'm Alexander Rubanga, the Acting Commissioner Customs. Allow me to register the apologies of the Commissioner General, who was unable to be with us today because he had a very pressing engagement that he could not leave. However, getting back to the question, yes, the conversation on revenue has always been a key pertinent issue. But allow me to say that, first of all, globally, most countries are actually moving away from international trade taxes and doing more of the facilitation. But it doesn't mean they are not collecting international trade taxes. The idea here is, one, to encourage exports, but also to encourage trade that will end up having a resonating effect on the domestic market. And I think that is what I needed to make clearly. And so you find out that the domestic economy is the one that we need to put in a lot of effort in so that we boost the economic activities domestically in terms of, first of all, our capacity to produce, in terms of the infrastructure, in terms of the machinery, so that we can actually raise productivity. Because that's key. Now, one of the things that URA is doing is that you notice that, first of all, if you look at the AFCFT agreement, you find out that almost 6 of the annexes to the protocol on trade in goods is actually directly having a bearing on customs activities. But also, when we talk about trade, international trade, we are talking about the movement of goods across the border. No wonder my friend and former colleague, Dr. Bagabo, raised his focus on goods. Now, we are facilitative in terms of making sure that we reduce the cost of doing business. Now, we reduce the cost of doing business by, first of all, simplifying the procedures, and then making sure that we harmonize them. We are doing this in terms of the various infrastructures, of course, with the help of our development partners who have been very supportive, like the OSBPs, like the electronic single windows, and then, of course, working with other regulatory agencies. Now, this is one of the key things that we are doing as URA. However, coming back to the issue of the informal trade, yes, it's true, it has been said that almost like if you look at the cross-border trade, you find that almost 80% or so are mainly women cross-border traders. Now, of course, the informal sector is a sector that is not very easy to bring on board. As you realize, it's true that Uganda, the informal sector, is a very, very huge sector in terms of our economy and even in terms of bringing them on the tax bracket. So what we are doing as an organization is to partner with entities like my sister shared about, to work with women groups, to work with other informal groups. We are working, for example, with Cross-Border Traders Association, and we're trying to see how we can also facilitate the simplified trade regime to ensure that they actually enjoy and plug into this particular facility. So that's one of the things that we are doing as an organization. But also, in terms of the taxation, you'll notice that people have been complaining so much that we are overtaxing people. I know it's a pain, but you see, all the taxes that we normally implement, and this is something that I think should be known. URA is an implementing agency. We normally implement tax policies that have been discussed and proposed and passed by Parliament. And most of these tax policies, normally, in most cases, during the formalization process, the process of formulating these tax policies, we do a lot of consultations at times with the different players within the market, within the economy. And so we then make proposals accordingly. Now, when we make these proposals and they are made and they're put on the floor of Parliament, they are debated. Of course, we are very cognizant of the fact that we need to also facilitate traders. That's why if you look at under the aegis of the East African Community, Customs Management Act in particular, there are some facilities, there are incentives that are given. There are incentives both in terms of exemption regimes, if you look at the 5th schedule of the Customs Management Act in the ESA. But even domestically, we are trying to encourage domestic investment. We have got quite a number of incentives. Although I can say yes, this seems to benefit more of the formal sector, more of the sector that has been established. But what we are trying to look at is if we can work together with the private sector. We've done a lot of work with the Private Sector Foundation to try and see how we can actually bring on board those who are informal, and then we actually bring them. We need to ask us. The thing we have is unlocking Uganda's potential moving forward. So it requires holding their hand and moving with them forward.
A round of applause for him. Now, I will at this moment request that you will be as precise and brief as possible in raising your supplement. So or your questions, but just before, the people who come to wait for business to flourish a bit and then you will come looking for the taxes. Are you looking at the side of business enablement to ensure that you can attract more, the tax compliance comes more as persuasive as opposed to coercion, whipping and coming with your tapes to close up and padlocks at the end of the day?
Yeah, once again, thank you, Mildred. Mildred, I've worked in customs for 22 years. And I've worked in URA for about 25 years. I can safely tell you that the URA of 1995, when I first joined URA, is a totally different URA of today. And one of the things that we've actually acknowledged, first of all, as URA, and the management of URA has taken note of, is that we cannot it's the client, it's the taxpayer is actually the king. The taxpayer is the one that we need to work with together. And that's why we've changed our approach. In fact, we've changed our approach from being we collect, but we want to look at us offering a service more than any other thing. Because we noticed that unless we work closely with the taxpayers, unless we work closely with the private sector, there's no way we're going to collect. And that's why we've created quite a number of initiatives. One of them is engaging the taxpayers. 2, providing them as much information as possible. 3, reducing the bottlenecks and the red tapes to their accessing of our facilities. We have done a lot of outreaches. Right now, even as I speak, part of the management of customs is in the northern region. One of the things they're doing is to engage the population, political leaders. We're having a conversation, in other words, with all our taxpayers and the private sector and the public. We're also, like my brother Ndugu Kulaije said, this is very key. One, we are trying to change the mindset of the staff.
Yes.
From being more of a coercive, like a collecting authority. No, we are changing their mindset to know that they're offering a service to Ugandans.
Okay.
And this is one of the things that we are key on. I may not tell you the details, but we specifically created a unit within the Human Resource Department on learning and development, mainly cultural change. We have changed our visions, we've changed our mission to therefore be able to address really the new disposition that we really want to play out in terms of ensuring that we work together with them. We make taxation not a burden. We want people to pay taxes. I know, I can say for sure that we're not yet there. There are some few challenges that we're still trying to work on and we're trying to improve on. So we're doing that. We've got client service centers that we've set up. We are doing a lot of talk shows, and I'm sure, Mildred, you're one of the people you've been so many times on our URA TV, and you've hosted quite a number of programs. You can testify to that.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of approach that we are taking as URA in this particular season, and we think that will help us so much in trying to bring taxpayers on board and listening to them. Listening is very key.
Yes.
At times, it's not good to always just implement and apply, but we believe that listening to to our clients, listening to our taxpayers is very, very, very important. So I want to just maybe submit there.
We still have a bit of time with the panel, but just before we go to the plenary, I think Brigadier has burning something. I'll give you a minute just before we get to the plenary and then get back to the panel as well.
Thank you, Mildred. I'm forced to come back because there's a lot of talk about taxation, as taxes being very high in this country, we're overtaxing our citizens. But when you cross-check the facts, we have the lowest GDP tax ratio in the region.
Yes.
You can imagine, even those economies which are smaller than ours have a higher tax ratio, GDP tax ratio than ours. But you find we politicize the issue of taxation. But two, it's also not lost on us that since Jesus' time, paying taxes was a problem. It's never popular. But even Jesus himself paid the tax. Three, why am I going to it? Of course, the uniform I'm putting on is bought through those taxes. So I have a stake in tax collection. So if you appreciate my uniform, then pay the tax, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brigadier Felix. I think for Uganda's discussion, it's always about the small tax space, and then we focus more on tax deepening than tax widening. So the few people who are actually paying the taxes continue to bear the brunt, as opposed to widening and having more and more options of having other taxes that can be able to work for the country. And of course, the discussion of do our taxes work is a discussion that every Ugandan would want to pay attention to. But allow me to get to the team that is going to be led by Mr. Ben Mwine to take us through the plenary. I know the ashes are ready, but could you just give us some rules of engagement, Ben, before we go on to this? We'll give it about 15, 20 minutes before we get back to our plenary.
Thank you, Mildred. And I see the hands are already up. Just a couple of things to note. Again, because we want to make sure that everyone has the chance to try and say something. And I will ask for your indulgence on this. I know we're very important people and we're on TV and I don't want to embarrass anybody. So please listen and listen very carefully. We will come to you, we will give you a microphone, we will ask you to introduce yourself and please do stand. Not only we can catch you properly on the camera, but also to make sure that our microphones are not interfered with. So please do stand, tell us your name and you give us your comment or question. It can only be one issue. So whatever it is that is burning for you is the issue that will be raised. If you go to a second one, I will literally yank the microphone from your hands, and then there will be a problem because you're respectable people at home with children who respect you, and then they'll hate you for nothing. So let's work together and be on the same page, and we'll do it systematically, sweeping across the room so that we can go in that order. We'll start with the lady in red, looking lovely. Oh, actually, so we'll start from here. You're already standing. Ladies first, so
okay.
At the UNDP, we are all about inclusiveness and making sure that we respect the rights of women. So far be it from us to get in the way. So please do give us your name and make a comment or question. We'll try and make sure you keep it under a minute, and then we'll go around the room.
Thank you so much. I'm a business consultant coming from Mox as a background, and banking as a profession I have enjoyed for so many years. And what do I want to say here? Unlocking Uganda's potential in the African continent free trade, that's something everybody can see. Yes, I'm looking at production versus services. Because marketing, am I there?
Sorry about that.
Thank you, Santais. Yeah, marketing, let me be here because I feel I'm so tired from there. Marketing is an aspect that can take us through to where we want to go, the promised land. But what is happening? What do we market? Products or services? And whichever way, are we baked or same-baked? And from the academia, I think that same-bakedness, that's the quality they're talking about. I'm summarizing, I'm sorry. I want to put this thing into a context that can really sweep through, and I'm sweeping. So I think it's the way we are brought up academically. No, let's start from family, because I come from a background where we are polygamous. As a polygamous family, our fathers and mothers took care of us. They endowed us with features to be hardworking. How could we be fed if you are so many families of about 50 children? and yet we had to compete to go to school, all that through. So it was brought us from down there, up there, so that we see through what do we want to take to the table, and what does the table want to give us. That is skilling, and that goes through either informal education or formal education. So what do we have as in Uganda? I think we are so same-skilled, despite the fact that we are so educated. Can we do something from the education point of view? For the youngsters and with the elders, we need to be reskilled to fit into these opportunities. Thank you so much.
Thank you. No, you didn't. You took too long, but we'll forgive it because you're the first person to go. So we'll start here at the front. Please try and don't give context. We'll leave it for another day. Let's try and be as brief because I want to have everyone in the room have a chance to say something.
Thank you very much.
You can use mine.
Hello. Thank you very much. My name is Leno Krialichila, and I'm the Secretary General of the Uganda Clearing Industry and Forwarding Association. And I also co-chair the Uganda National Committee on Non-Tariff Barriers. I mean, on a National Committee on Trade Facilitation, and I chair the Uganda National Committee on Non-Tariff Barriers. And of course, for the CTF, I'm a member of the Regional Committee on Non-Tariff Barriers. I had a number of issues, but since there are rules, let me just comment on one general thing. As Uganda, we are proud that during the formation of the CTF, Uganda was the main, EAC was the main benching point. And also in the EAC, we're at the lead of the integration of the EAC. Now, my concern is we have had some challenges in the EAC. The main one being adherence to the protocol. The rules are there, but partner states are not following them. And then we have issues of NTVs, which keep coming. When we meet in regional meeting, we resolve them, but partner states do not implement. There is issue of enforcement. Now, how are we assured that when we move to the CTF, we're not going to fall into the same problem, whereby I move my goods to Nigeria, and then they are rejected, I have a problem of bringing them behind. So why, if we are proud of that, but it's a challenge to us within EAC. Now, when we go to the bigger area, maybe the Secretariat will help us in this.
Okay.
How are we going to be assured of this? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I'm Paul Hijiro. I represent FIAFA. I'm the treasurer. My comment is mainly on comparative advantage. All these panelists have been singing about how Uganda is endowed. And Ugandans have taken advantage to a small measure. But I think the small measure they have taken has not been rewarded to encourage other people to take advantage of that comparative advantage. What example am I can give an example. With production of milk, Ugandans changed their herds to produce milk, and Ugandan milk is produced at a very low cost, definitely because of the comparative advantage. But when, as Rino has said, when the PAL, the company which exports Lato, goes to Kenya, they say, no, it's not produced in Uganda, you are just packaging. They come here, they find out that it is really produced by the farmers in Uganda. And they still insist that it doesn't go. So what example are we setting at East African level? As he says, if we cannot do it at East African level, how shall we go back to Dakar or Nigeria? And I attend the meeting of AFCTA in Senegal and Morocco. The benchmarking region was East Africa. So if we cannot do it here, in terms of sugar, in terms of milk,
okay.
How do we again encourage our people who have crossed and changed their herds from Ankorelong longhorn cows, which are for tourism, to production, and then they can't sell even to Kenya. I don't know whether the person from UNBS can tell us, was it a genuine standard or quality, or it is just an NTB like Elino has said?
Okay, thank you. I think that will be answered by Mr. Biro.
Thank you very much.
I need to remind our plenary that we need to be cognizant of time, so please don't make me have to snatch the microphone from your hand. So we'll start here, go here, and then come to the lady over here.
Okay. Thank you so much, UNDP, for this platform. My name is Busin Yanuruddin. I represent Merchandise Uganda, an online platform that enables Ugandans to showcase their products locally and globally. For this trade to work, we request government to invest more in training of Ugandans on how to use digital tools to promote their products, but also reduce the cost of internet. Is so much expensive, and also connect to other areas that are not connected to the internet. When you go to Karamoja, those side of Kasese, people don't have access to internet, and yet the internet or digitalization is the only way enabler of Ugandans to showcase their products worldwide, but also invest more in what we call business formalization. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I'm Dr. Julius Yarhanga. I work at PSFU as a sector coordinator for oil, gas, minerals, and professional services. To start with, I want to thank the URA, most especially the Commissioner General, for having an open door policy to engage in conversation with the private sector. We appreciate that. What I want to comment about is facilitating business growth. I think it's one key point that we haven't touched a lot, and I wouldn't want really anyone to whitewash it away. One, if we must be competitive, our tax regime here in Uganda must be stable. An investor must know that if I'm investing my 10 billion in an investment, I should be guaranteed that the tax regime is stable at least for the next 3-4 years, such that I get my returns on investment. That's one. Two, we must ensure that there is some level of negotiation to deal with the cost of money in Uganda. Because at the end of the day, we will produce, but our products will not be competitive on the market because the money we put in the cost of production is high. That affects prices, so we won't still be competitive. So we want to really sell and leverage on the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. My name is Julian Mwesji Kajuma. I'm the CEO at Still Pure Investments and a member of the Federation of Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises. Thank you for this platform. My issue is on the negotiated bilateral agreements and how the SMEs can access them. Markets are negotiated at bilateral level, but when it comes to implementation, there is a real challenge. Where is the structured path? Where is the structured route that as an SME, either in agriculture or in manufacturing, when you manufacture or when you produce your product, the next level is this. The next level is this. At district level, we collect at this point, and then we have a direct and deliberate point of access into these markets. If you say that Uganda has the sweetest pineapple or the sweetest banana, that is just a statement. Who has the database of farmers that are producing these bananas? Who has the database of the agriculturalists producing this sweet pineapple? Who is organizing them? Who is organizing them to have access to these markets? How do we do it? Ugandans are not lazy. If you told them that tomorrow the market is here and your product is going to be taken, trust me, they're going to do it. Yeah. People are just they don't know how to go about it, and they are lost there. And
Okay.
that's why we are going to continue to have a low-income economy and generations, because no one is helping. A farmer doesn't need too much to tell them about grow this, but where is the path?
Okay.
Where is the structure?
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So yes, we can organize and all of that, but can we agree that we do have the best pineapples? Okay, I just wanted to make sure that point was properly
It's
captured.
taken home.
Let's agree that
Okay.
we do have the best pineapples and bananas. Then we can organize. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you so much. My name is Agnes Kisembo. I work with UN Women. So I just wanted to make a comment on unlocking the potential of Ugandan women.
Okay.
Because one of the panelists talked about it's difficult for most women's businesses to grow. And that's where I'm picking it from. So first of all, we need to understand, why is it difficult for most women's businesses to grow? That's the starting point, because we have already seen that over 80% of the informal sector is made up by women. So in line with taxation, I just wanted to understand, are women in position, for example, to effectively register online? Because you really have to understand where they have a constraint. How many of this percentage within the informal sector can comfortably use online services? And I'm looking at tax collection, registration of businesses, all the intricacies that come with the procedure of registration. Then I also wanted to pose a question. Do women fully understand the benefits that come with formalizing their businesses? And if they are hesitant or scared, why? Those are important questions that we need to address. Then also understanding the gender roles and the burden of care. There is no way to go around it. We need to address it if we are to fully unlock the potential of women to fully participate and also benefit from the opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I can validate your point on this with a personal testimony. My brother, who is in the diaspora, recently sent me some money to buy my mom a phone. She's a farmer. She's doing quite well with her chickens and cows and everything. And so we bought her a very nice Samsung smartphone that I delivered to her maybe a week and a half or two ago. I called her yesterday and she started using it. She's still comfortable with the Katochi, and she's like, no, this one works perfectly fine. So there's definitely a gap there in terms of transitioning to the digital thing. The Brigadier Kalaji, the mindset change. So there's definitely something that needs to be done in that regard.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Patricia Eloto, I'm from UN Women. I have two very quick issues. I would like to find out all those beautiful things Amos talked about that we read in the papers and we glorify what Uganda is about. How can we make use of our existing institutions, for example, the embassies, the missions out of this country, to unlock Uganda's potential in tourism, marketing, and all that? And then secondly, the women and youth place in the African Continental Free Trade. Most of the SMEs are dominated by women. And Uganda is reliant on rain-fed agriculture. How can we make technology accessible to these women in the face of climate change? As we sit here, the COPs, Conference of Parties, is going on in Glasgow. Nobody has talked about climate change. We are talking about the end of the value chain of the markets. If we are talking of increasing productivity, where do we start? Our weather is beautiful, but it's changing. Thank you.
All right. Ben, I'll give you about 2-3 more questions before we get them answered and get back to the panel.
Cool, no problem.
My name is Chigong Robert from Masaka, where we grow pineapples and coffee. Personally, I'm a coffee farmer, but because our soil has lost fertility, I've gone into pineapple. But the challenge is, and the question also goes to Afande Kulaije, do you really have the political will to revamp cooperatives? The notion is that your government, maybe and my government, destroyed cooperatives. We can only sell as a block, not as individuals. Then the aviation aspect, we can't go into international trade without discussing aviation. Nobody is discussing it honestly. Unless we organize our aviation, I'm a coffee farmer. I want to export my coffee from Masaka to Nigeria. Do I have a facility, an infrastructure in place? No. So what's your plan as government? Everything starts with you and ends with you. What plans do you have for aviation? You know we only have 2 route channels under Uganda Airlines. You need to, what plans do you have? I think, where is the role of youth? I think you are discussing so much. I also belong to the Youth Coalition for SDGs, but I've not heard about the role of young people, generations before me. Where is their role in achieving all the aspirations you're talking about? How are you going to achieve them? For us, we say leaving no one behind, inclusive growth. Where is their role? It's not well stipulated. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Mildred. Let me come to our economist and then we'll hand back to you. I should point out, I think it's very clear that you can't do anything without the youth in this country. Exactly. They literally own the country. So any discussions we have really must involve them at every level.
And also we'll have just one final one later on with the plenary.
Absolutely. So we'll just go back to the panel and then we'll come back to the House.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Tangavel Palanivel. People call me Palani. I work for UNDP in Uganda. So far, it's a national dialogue. And so therefore, actually, I wanted to actually have a kind of real dialogue among the Uganda. Since I'm kind of actually non-Uganda, I thought I will just take a couple of minutes to give international perspective. Today's session is the strategic positioning of Uganda to benefit from the Continental Trade Agreement, strategic positioning. So it's basically, there is a 2 way of actually addressing the demand, market, comparative advantage. One, actually the panel members, many of you highlighted the existing comparative advantage of Uganda, which is truly, right by focusing agriculture like banana, pineapple, coffee, cocoa, whatever it is. Absolutely, I can tell you that I lived in different countries, in developing countries. I can tell you that the fruits, vegetables are high quality. You do have a comparative advantage on that area. But that's not sufficient. Like if you see the developmental experience, actually existing comparative advantage is not good enough to survive when you move forward. So you need to identify what would be the demand for emerging demand for tomorrow. Yesterday, our resident representative highlighted that there is large youth population. There is a rapid urbanization. In addition, I can go and highlight, there is also growing middle class in Africa. Yes, Africa is poor. Only 30–40% of the population is poor. But the rest of 60% of Africa, they are now middle income. They can afford to be a high quality, consumer durable, whether it is the kind of household items or office items, telecommunicating items, all kind of things. There is a kind of study shows that demand, the new demand, emerging demand, going to increase rapidly in the next 10 years. So the demand would be like double. Fortunately, Uganda is not actually small country. Uganda, if you look into the population, it's like 6th, 7th largest country in the continent. So Uganda could actually focus what would be the demand for future and try to position itself some kind of, I would say, the high value manufacturer item to be catering to the rising middle class, rising youth population, the rising urbanization. Those people in the coming years not going to be satisfied only with the banana or pineapple. They look for something else. So you position that. And number 2, the trade is not a mean. it's actually, trade is not a end, actually. It's a mean for economic growth kind of things. So we need to focusing on the job creation, the value additions. The first presentation this morning, actually this afternoon, made by that, Dr. Paul highlighted that gold is one of the largest export in the country. He did not actually spell out that. Yesterday, a few days back, the ministry attended one validation meeting of the diagnostic trade integrated studies which the ministry has done. So I was asked to comment upon that. What happened that which the presenter did not highlight that gold also happened to be the largest import item also. If you see the last 2-3 years, Uganda export $1.8 billion of worth of gold to the other country. But Uganda also import the same amount, exact same amount of gold from other country. So absolutely there is no value addition. So that's a comment I highlighted in the meeting to the ministry, saying that if Uganda is actually exporting raw gold, or if Uganda is exporting same gold, re-exporting, then it is not giving any job creations. It is not bringing any value addition to this country. So that therefore you need to look into that. So therefore whatever you do, please look into that more from the job creation point of view. My third, you can stop Ben if you want to. My third point actually, the trade definitely gives actually opportunity. But as our resident representative highlighted, the importance of regional connectivity of road, telecommunications, the electricity, the grid, regional grid, all kind of connectivity issues is important. In addition, the importance of South-South cooperation at the political level. You may have legal agreement to export to Western Africa, but if your neighboring country is not politically in a friendly environment, then you may have all kind of actually building block constraint for building roads or building railways to export item from Uganda to Western Africa. So therefore that's I would say third point. Anyway, I stop here. Maybe if time permit, I'll come back again. Thank you.
Now I know why people like Brigadier Kulaija and the police feel very good. It feels very nice to be feared. Right, so we're going to hand back to Mildred. I should point out that we'll go back to the panel for now, but then we'll have a much longer session. Even after we finish the TV broadcast, we'll continue with the rest of our online audience and do all of this. And just Mildred to point out something that's very important from what he said, and I think some of the concerns that have been raised by some of the people here in the House. The reason why we're having this dialogue and why it needs to sink into each and every one of us is that we understand that there are challenges with trade on the continent, right? And the reason we're talking about unlocking the potential is because we know that there's a padlock somewhere. And the discussions we're having are on how do we find a key to unlock that padlock. And the most important thing for all of us, and I know on behalf of the UNDP and the government yesterday, I appointed everyone an ambassador of the FCFTA. And this is what we must understand, okay? For this thing to work, it's simply a question of, does everyone understand, one, its potential? It's another keyword that is up there. And number two, its significance and importance. And these are the things that, people like Brigadier Kulaija will know about. These are things that you studied in school and have preached. The moment people understand things that Mr. Wekesa has been preaching, and we're seeing the fruits of that, of how tourism has risen in terms of foreign exchange, when you grasp what we think this thing can be as a game changer, and we begin to reduce talking and actually doing, and it's across the board, not just here in Uganda, but across the continent. That happens by us having discussions like this to open people's minds and eyes and then get things done. So this is just the beginning of a discussion to take us to the promised land.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Benmane. A round of applause for him. Managing those few minutes of fame for everyone becomes a little bit hard. And I think for the Christians, making it easy, we are moving from reading the book of Lamentations to reading the book of Acts. All right? Acts of Apostles. I think that's where we are going right now. And for the gentleman from Masaka, you were asking about the role of the youth. If you could just even read the headline of this document right here. It talks about making the AFCFTA work for women and youth. And the brilliant stories. I was particularly paying attention to a story of one Nigerian, I think it's Adao Sakwe of Nuli Juice Farm, talking about the agricultural sector from farm to table. I was also paying attention to a story of a young lady from, I think it's Namibia, that's Irea Jonah, who is looking at turning a seaweed that seems to be a problem to the country into animal feed, and so many other beautiful stories. For example, I think a story, there is one about the creatives industry, and that's for a lady from Zimbabwe. So you just need to pay attention to this document. There is a lot more attention paid to the women and the youth because of their role in business day to day across Africa. And like I mentioned, the statistics, the 90% of the labor force is actually provided by the women, and they are affected very highly, and we need to pay attention to them. So I think that clearly answers. Just pay attention to that document right there. So we'll go to the panel, and this time I'm also going to institute some terms and conditions. We will use about 2 minutes or 3 max to respond to some of the questions that have come through. Then we'll take your final thoughts. Before we can go off air, we have a few minutes to go off air, and then we will lengthen it a little bit more right after our TV audience to continue with the discussion a little longer. But I'll start off, let me start off with Mr. Biru. There was a question about the meat. You know, people have moved from long-horned cattle to, other breeds, and then there is no market.
Yes, I could call that dairy products, beginning from the cow itself to all the products of the cow, and confirm that we have the standards, both regional and international standards, to allow this product to access the markets they should. The case in point of milk in Kenya, again, as I told you, you can negotiate anything else other than quality. So the issue of Lato in Kenya is not quality, because the same standard Kenya uses to certify their milk is the same standard Uganda has certified that milk. And that's why you see, according to all the discussion and questions asked, standards don't appear anywhere. So it is something else other than what? Other than quality. Because that product is certified, it is being sold in other countries beyond East Africa, we are aware. They export it beyond, and it's good and safe. So that one we can defend, Lato, and so is our maize. By the way, do you know the opportunity that came as a result of the ban on our maize in Kenya? At that time when the Kenya told us, please, your maize is not good. So we had to mobilize all the grain dealers and the maize dealers. At that time, they had about 27 millers of grain. But that is also was coming from only 2 from the time of the lockdown. You remember when the first lockdown, government looked for maize flour to buy. At that time, we only had 2 companies that were certified with the milled maize, and they could not satisfy the market. So as a result of that, people realized that if you don't have quality of maize, you are not going to get the market. And they were right, because another lockdown was actually coming. So during that time, by the second lockdown now, when we changed from posho to cash, we had already moved to about 27. And that's around the time Kenya now said, your maize is not very good enough. We told these people, please stop getting stranded at the border. Let's go for value addition. As we talk now, we have 100 companies that are now fully processing maize with the mills, and over 200 others on the line being helped to get certified a quality mark. This maize, once processed, is not encumbered on the time on when you will sell it, because the shelf life has been increased. And therefore, we now wait for Kenya to come and look for maize themselves than us going to look for the maize. And all these are certified by UNBS, and that's what we are talking about. Value addition, to be able to make sure that let the quality open the markets and not any other encumbrance. So that's very, very, very important for us. If I can comment on the issue of comparative advantage, again, I think Amos mentioned about the uniqueness of our products, although they are homogeneous, but there are certain parameters or ingredients that make them outstanding from other parts of the other same products in other worlds, which we should actually take advantage of. My brother who likes eating goat has even told you the smell alone, the aroma. The aroma of a Ugandan goat is different from any other goat. And we can take that as a comparative advantage. Amos has told you that much as the whole world grows pineapple, a Ugandan pineapple actually has a unique taste. And that becomes, for me, a comparative advantage we can explore. But again, my brother, Jero, mentioned the rewards and encouraging people who are trying to promote these unique products. What are we rewarding them?
Oh, yes.
And I have a challenge at hand now. There is only a product you can find in the world called kombucha, and they're calling them now energy drinks, and everybody's making a laugh out of them. Stock. These products are being processed from actually banana. Instead of banana getting wasted, people have gone into fermentation and brewing to make a beverage. But I'm telling you, is a laugh of the public, is a laugh. Tomorrow I'm appearing before the Committee of Parliament as to why we are allowing these products on the market, which have increased. They are responsible for increased pregnancies. You see? But you see, we are saying that these products must be safe, and we are saying that let's help our people to make sure that they put safe and quality products, and let's not discourage them and ban them.
Oh, yes.
Because those things are truly Ugandan, and it's an opportunity for Uganda to be able to sell this, because you can only trace them and find them in Uganda. Okay. It's a comparative advantage we should nurture and guide these people to be able to make sure that the kombuchas, the energy drinks they produce, they don't mention the claim of the extras, which the Bureau is not aware of, because for us it's about safety, it's about health, and that's why we certify them against it. So we are telling our honorable members of parliament that kombuchas are not bad. We even made a local Ugandan standard to be able to nurture these people.
Yeah.
Because it's truly Uganda. Once they are brewed, fermented, and packaged against that standard, I encourage you to drink, but not because of the extras they claim, which we are addressing with the NDA, we are addressing it with the UCC to make sure that the media houses like you should not encourage them that apart from a quality mark, there is also something in addition. That one we are not aware, but these are good. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And directly I'll come to your neighbor, Brigadier General Felix Kulaije, in a few minutes as well to respond to some of the questions. And one key one was about the cooperatives.
Thank you, Mildred. Thank you, the audience. The political will is there. What, in my view, is missing is the mindset in terms of, on the part of we, the government workers. Are we looking at ourselves as servants of the population, or we think our offices are an end in themselves?
You're permanent and pensionable.
Because we are promoted automatically after 3 years or 4 years in the public service. People do not have the tasking of their brain to make innovations that serve our people. As far as I'm concerned, cooperatives are high on the agenda. OWC is at the forefront in terms of promoting cooperatives. But it's good you mentioned about coffee, because I have information more than you know about coffee exports. If you may recall, a few years ago, we had very many private companies exporting coffee. What happened to them? Maintenance of standard. The importers across this country, I mean out of this country, gave the specifications of the kind of coffee they wanted. Because the market became attractive, instead of maintaining the specifications, we put in the substandards. We began putting in coffee that is not ripe. All right? So those who are buying our coffee rejected it. And many of these companies collapsed because they could not sustain the market. So again, mindset. You want to make easy money at the expense of your product. In the end, you lose the market.
Oh, yeah.
So even if we have cooperatives, if the same mindset exists, because those who are cooperating are the same Ugandans, unless we change our thinking and know that hard work is what brings money, not fluking, we shall continue facing the same challenge.
Okay.
Now the youth. Interestingly, people talk about the youth as if many of us have not been youth before. We didn't come from the blue. We also grew through youthfulness.
Yes.
And in the audience, there is a person from my neighboring village. He knows how we were brought up. Hard work was the trademark. But today, we think somebody else owes us a living. And we, the parents, are to blame, because we have pampered the children not to go through what we went through. And so you have a daughter or a son that can sleep up to 10 in the morning. And then you are saying government is not doing anything for the youth. Excuse me, you young person, what are you using your brain for? What are you using your hands for? And I have listened to Mr. Wekesa's story. It's not different from mine. we have struggled to reach where we are from our youth. Now, thirdly, the impact of these phones. We tend to imagine that life is as easy as we see on movies and on social media. To the contrary, where these movies are made, they have 40 million people living below the poverty line. But we never think about it. We think every American is doing very well. No, 40 million Americans live below the poverty line. So what those who have made it, Donald Trump wrote a book sometime in 2004. And he asked a question. I sleep for 4 hours. You who sleeps for 8, how can you compete with me? Ladies and gentlemen, no one else owes us a living. And this lamentation, they are blocking our products. Can I remind you, every country pursues her selfish interests in the international system.
Oh, yeah.
And it's high time we who facilitate others to export, to get market, we fold our sleeves and go out aggressively to look for market for our products.
Yes.
But two, it's also important that we Ugandans do change our attitude. Even the labor force, you are talking about the youth. A Ugandan will work only 14 days out of 30. The others, I'm burying a senga, I'm burying an uncle, I'm burying a grandfather. So at the end of the day, even the labor market detests us because we are spending more time in the burials than in working.
Oh, yes.
So the youth have been educated on what? The other day I was arguing with somebody who was telling me she wants to do international relations. And then I asked her, then after that what? She's shining away from a professional course I was suggesting, going for international relations. How many diplomats shall we have?
Okay.
So, marketability of our skills. Do we have any skills to market with the young people?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brigadier. I'll be coming back to you. Let me come to you, Mr. Alexander. Some questions that did come to you, if you can be able to respond to them in the shortest time possible.
Thank you, Mildred. The question that I think I should be able to respond to is a question from Dr. Biaruhanga. One, of course, I do acknowledge the appreciation that you gave us for being open and adopting an open door policy. Then, of course, the other issue you talked about was the tax regimes that must be stable. I totally agree with you that, changing the tax regime every other day affects predictability, and the businessman needs to plan. And that is something that I totally agree with you on. We are having discussions with the Ministry of Finance and quite a number of other stakeholders, and that's a conversation that we are having to try and see that we actually make the tax regime stable, predictable. So it's a pain that government has taken note of, and it's something that is being considered. That's what I can say about that. But it's a well brought consideration. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Wekesa, there were a few questions, maybe suggestions that you need to respond to as well.
Well, I wanted to start with the standards. I've gone into agro-processing, and somebody mentioned a lady talked about. Now, let me go first to Mr. Bill. Mr. Bill, very eloquent. I'm investing in Soroti. The Itesos are very eloquent when he's speaking Iteso,
sure,
but also English. They are very eloquent people.
Sure.
Now, but recently I was in Nairobi, having a chat with a guy, and this man tells me I am into export. I asked him, what do you export? He said, I export sweet potatoes. Does Kenya grow as many sweet potatoes? He says, no. During the season, I send trucks and trucks of people to Soroti, to Tesoland, to actually bring me potatoes for me to export to Eastern Europe. That sent me thinking. We speak about standards. Is it that we cannot package these potatoes and send them to the market ourselves? Are we lacking information? Is the Minister of Trade able to bring this information together and be able to engage the youth? Because I'm sure we can also export. The other thing is also information, like Madame talks about. So when I was starting to build Pella commodities, I've gone into agro-processing because I've been forced by the conditions of COVID in diversification, because I was doing very well in tourism. built up a factory that can clean up to 80 tons an hour. We're actually bringing in the first aflatoxin scrubber in Africa, by the way. It should be here in 1 month time. It's going to be the first one that can remove aflatoxins from maize. So we're going to be the first country in the region to do that. Now, when I'm building, I am very good at marketing. I start marketing, and I get 2 companies from Kenya. One offers me 60,000 metric tons of third-grade maize to export to them. And I thought it's very easy to just walk to the market and actually get the maize. I realized that farmers can only grow on 2 acres, 3 acres, 5 acres, and 1 bag. And so I go back to the man and say, I have to organize myself. Now I'm organizing a group of 8,000 farmers to promise them work. I have to start afresh to actually target the season of next year, as opposed to, I thought it was as easy as it is said. But I think the other thing that I also see that government people must engage in now. I would like, especially our chief negotiator here, Mr. Okot, I want to say it's the first time I've seen you in my life, and you're negotiating on my behalf. I am sure these guys also don't know you. So who are you negotiating for? The other thing that I want us to encourage government to do is to stop working in silos. Let me give you Brazilian model. In Brazil, they would say the next 5 years, our dreams for coffee. Minister of Trade will make sure that the coffee has the right market. Minister of Works will make sure that the roads leading to the coffee production are also working. Minister of Tourism will make sure that every tourist that comes to the country takes coffee. And all of them work together. You do not need another Minister of Work. All the ministries will make sure that whatever they're planning for actually is achieved. Now when I go to marketing, I think for us as Ugandans, it's good for us to look for external market. Go to Kenya, go to Tanzania. But let me tell you one thing. When 1 million tourists arrive through Entebbe Airport, if each tourist in 10 days eats 2 pineapples, do you know that we'll have indirectly exported 2 million pineapples? Yes. If each tourist eats 2 eggs, remember that the tourist is willing to pay even $7 for eggs. So if we market this country to tourists, I can assure you that every single day a tourist will eat 2 eggs, which means 2 million eggs will be desired. 2 million eggs will be desired every day for that tourist. You'll find that you need 20 million eggs. How many farmers are involved? You start reading and doing things like that. If we don't think in that direction as a people, we're going to go nowhere. So marketing of Uganda is very important. Madrid, before I finish, let me tell you that by 2035, the intra-Africa travel is going to grow to about 300 million passengers. Before COVID, they were doing about 97. African Airlines were only transporting about 94 million people. And so companies like Emirates, Qatar were doing about, them combined with African Airlines were doing about 180 million passengers traveling across Africa. What this simply means is that if we position ourselves well, if we market this country properly, I give you an example in terms of figures. South Africa spends $4 million to tell South Africans about South Africa. South Africa spends $10 million to tell Africans about South Africa. South Africa spends $70 million to tell non-Africans about South Africa. For us, if you go to government and tell government people that we need to spend $10 million to market Uganda, they would rather have nice 4-wheel drive around town, enjoying these luxuries, than putting money in where we can earn money and all of us survive as a people.
Okay. Lessons that we are supposed to be taking at this moment. Well, TV time is almost coming to an end, but I will give an opportunity as well to Christine Rita Namsovia Abankwa on particularly the issue of, at an individual level for SMEs, how can they unlock this potential? Like Ben said, there is a lock, but how do we get the key to open that padlock?
Thanks, Mildred. Before I get to that quickly, I just wanted to answer the question on women, what you were saying. Before I mentioned that a lot of women get into business for survival, right? So we need to speak to them in a language that they understand. When you talk about why they should formalize, we need to sell to them the value proposition of formalizing and participating in all the interventions we're talking about. Because even when it comes to training, a lot of times it's just too expensive. It's working. Basically, there's that saying that if it's working, why? If it's not broken, why fix it? So what they're doing is sort of working for them already. They're thinking about providing for their families, and they're managing to do that without formalizing already. So now what we need to do, especially as the trainers, is to sell to them the value proposition in a language that they understand, which is this will help you to grow. It'll help you to provide for your family more. I hope that answers you. And then, of course, we need the community outreach as well. I wanted to answer the question on the youth, which is basically what Mildred has asked. So unlocking Africa's potential at individual level is really about self-actualizing. And if you look at some of the greatest innovations that have come out of Silicon Valley, for example, it's about people working to fulfill their ultimate potential. And we find a lot of African youth are squeezed out of high potential business areas. So I think what's very important, yesterday somebody mentioned the importance of the Ministry of Education being here. We need to tackle this from primary school level, secondary school level. What are you good at? Everybody here is good at something, right? We've been talking about the Bible. The Bible says that your gift will bring you before great men, right? So basically, we need to start talent mining from a very young age. What are you naturally good at? What can you monetize? We need to be looking at entrepreneurship training as well in schools so that we develop a trade mindset, a Pan-African mindset, and we play in the knowledge economy as well, because we're talking about services as well. Not everybody was built to sell tangible products. Some of us just sell what we know. So if you're operating in a system where what you know doesn't sell, there's no market for you. And we need to create that market. Again, I mentioned earlier on export enhancement support. Many of the things that SMEs need, especially the micro SMEs and the startups, is support in, besides, finance, communication, stakeholder engagement, project management, digitization. We look outside for solutions to these problems, but we have very talented Africans in our midst. Many of us are in jobs that we may not like. We're talented in other areas. And if we can do this talent mining exercise, it helps us to unlock our potential. And what happens is the services that we can offer based on our knowledge can support SMEs that are exporting, because SMEs cannot afford consultants, they cannot afford advisory services, and yet they're talented people who can offer those services to them. And those talented people, like the youth who have been squeezed out of the workforce for whatever reason, have a market, whether it is in e-commerce, digitization. Somebody has excellent negotiating skills. They can help SMEs to learn how to set terms and conditions that are commensurate with their value. And what happens now is that person is also engaging in Pan-African trade, because they are supporting a business that is trading outside, and then they benefit from network effects. And that means that then they can start finding markets for themselves outside, selling their services. I also think that when we unlock potential at individual level, it will help us to reverse some of the impacts of the brain drain, because if we are Pan-African minded and we go outside, we know that Africa is still a business market for us. We bring back the skills that we have picked up from outside to build the capacity of the local SMEs. So the best way to get somebody to do something is to make them see the value in it and want to do it and want to cooperate. So if somebody's, like the youth we're talking about, if their potential has been unlocked, they have a space. We talked about the creative industry, one of the stories. Yes, I'm finishing, Mildred, sorry.
Yes.
Then it helps us to realize that the interventions we're talking about are what will make our visions a reality and help guide us towards positioning ourselves to take advantage of the opportunities we're talking about.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rita. We're just wrapping up for TV, but we will definitely be coming back to the panel and a bit of the plenary. But just before we go off TV, allow me invite Ms. Elsie Giatafwa, who is the UNDP resident representative in Uganda, to give us some brief remarks as well before we get to close off our on-air time. And then we will get back to the panel for just a few slots and a few questions before we wind up day 2. But remember, we still have day 3 tomorrow. Ms. Elsie, please come through. Yes, you can come here.
Well, thank you very much, Mildred, and what spirited conversation this afternoon. A round of applause to yourselves. So I just want to share some reflections as we conclude the day. Why are we doing what we are doing? Why are we here talking about AFCFTA? What is in it for us as Ugandans and as Africa? And I want to establish the facts again. We started our conversation yesterday saying that Africa trades amongst itself 16.6% only, compared to EU of 65%. I think the Americans are doing about 50%. Amos talked about pineapple. I just came from Accra. A factory is closing down because they can't find pineapples. We have milk. We don't have milk. We are importing milk from elsewhere, but for Africa. I took 20 young Ugandans to Accra. The Ghanaians are importing leather from elsewhere. They don't even know that leather exists here in Uganda. They just don't know. We went to a hotel to take coffee. The minister said, "Can I have African coffee?" My sister from Ghana said, "We don't have African coffee. We do," I don't want to mention names. Okay, they just don't even know the opportunities that is within the continent. So colleagues, this is not abstract. This is about opportunities in the region that we should take advantage of. When I told somebody about weather in Uganda, a beautiful place to come, they just didn't know. They had never heard about Renzoris. They go to London and other places. They can afford to come here. They just don't know. So why are we doing what we are doing? We want to create opportunities for our people. We want to stop exporting our wealth. We want to be able to create opportunities for our youth. That is what it is. So like Brigadier General said, it is about mindset change. Look at the glass half full and not empty. Now, when I listen to, I had reflections about we are producing the same thing. So what is the comparative advantage? We are doing sugar. We are all doing maize. So what is in it for us? And I think that's something that we need to change. You cannot tell me that Germany and France are not producing the same things. They produce cars. They produce pharmaceuticals. But they have their niche areas. And that's what we have to think about as Africans. When we start the conversation by saying that, we are producing the same thing, then we don't make even the efforts. The third thing that I heard, there's imports coming in, so it may squeeze it out. But don't we have imports already here? What about the young Ghanaian that you can twin with? We produce, between us and Cote d'Ivoire, 70% of the world's cocoa. And we have cocoa here in Bidumbujo. But I guess in the world's wider scale of things, we're probably ending a fraction on the table, and crumbs on the table. Why can't we add value to our cocoa to make niche chocolates, for example? So there are opportunities for us, please, colleagues. Let's look at the glass half full and not empty. I had issues about SADC, EAC. We benchmarked, there were problems, so what's going to be new? Why would AFCTA be different? And I think that's why the rules are there. The enforcement of the rules will be important. The commitment and the leadership will be important. The trade governance dimension will be important. The digitalization dimension will be important so that we are more efficient in our processes than anything else. I don't want you to go into all the, responding to everything that was said today. But all I can say, and coming back to what is in it for us as Uganda, our national strategy, what should we focus on and how? How do we link it to URA? How do we link it to tourism? How do we link it to, everything else that we are talking about? And I think the devil is in the details as we look at the national strategy for Uganda. And this is the beginning of a conversation with you to see what can we do. But the last thing that we want is what the colleague from UMA said yesterday, that after came, we saw it, we said goodbye, and it went the other way. The last thing that we want is that there is a great opportunity for Africa for the first time. Why are we not trading amongst ourselves? Why is it that you have the leather here and my brother and sister is going elsewhere, but for the region? And I think if we begin to look at the opportunities in the region, we can always circumvent the challenges. If we start with the challenges first, we defeat ourselves as Africans and as Ugandans. And I want to end on a positive note and to say, when Mr. Wakesa said, it's a beautiful continent, it's a beautiful country that we have. I went to Costa Rica once and we saw people paying to listen to the cock crow. They had never listened to the cock crow. And so you travel because you want to hear the cock crow. And you pay for it. So if AFCTA is coming and tourism is an opportunity, even for Africans, you have a growing middle class. I think that's the point Palani was trying to make. A growing middle class who can afford certain things. How do we entice them to come to the Pearl of Africa? And I have traveled quite widely in the region. This is perhaps the most beautiful. The most beautiful. So let me conclude my reflections by saying that we are here to have a conversation as a people. That the time is now that Africa looks within. His Excellency, our President, has been talking about markets, coming together, regional integration. These are practical things that we are talking about. The presidents in the countries now have signed on to this agreement. It takes you and I, the private sector, the government, the civil society, the women, the youth, to make it happen. If you can connect to your brother in Ghana, your sister in Nigeria, in Sierra Leone, in Liberia, and elsewhere, we have great potential to create jobs for our people. We have great potential to make wealth. We have great potential to reduce poverty. Under AFCTA, we estimate that we are going to reduce extreme poverty, 30 million out of extreme poverty, 68 million out of moderate poverty. This is the reality of Africa. So let's look at the glass half full and not empty. Thank you.
It is the passion for me, speaking about Africa and speaking about just how much potential we have that we need to harness. And I think Ms. Elsie spoke to one clear thing. If you can forget everything else that she said, remember she said that let us start by looking at the opportunities and not the challenges. Let's learn to read from the book of Acts and not Lamentations. Many a times we pay attention to the problems that we have and we forget the opportunities that we do have as Africa, as a continent. And when she also talks about inclusiveness, can we look at, well, I was reading it is the African Human Development Index report for 2016, which did clarify that Africa loses 95 billion shillings annually because of gender inequality. We're losing that money because we're not including everyone across board that is supposed to be coming through. And we're losing about $35.4 billion US in import bills. I mean, we're importing from other countries, and yet we can be able to share that money within ourselves. For our own audience, we're going to be closing it at this, but of course we have another day, which is day 3. Tomorrow, we're going to be continuing with the discussion still on day 3 tomorrow. But for those who are joining us on television, that is UBC TV Uganda, Inspiring Uganda, as well as NBS Television, we want to say a goodbye to you. But right here at the Addis Hall at Kampala Serena Hotel, we are continuing with the discussion for a few more minutes just to be able to wrap up this. But thank you very much, NBS Television, and thank you very much, UBC TV. We say bye-bye to you.